Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or if you're watching a recording of this Fireside Chat, this is our 96th, so you're all very, very welcome. Eimear Burke here, and I will introduce you to my guest, who is a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. But first, may I begin with a prayer for peace. Gamara Shiocon ar fud na crinne, Gamara Shiocon in our Jaili agus in our Jirha, Ganari Lin in our Kajgarmaka, Gamwich Boikas Jeev, Je Chwiftacha, Spirit Chwiftacha. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into plowshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the Holy Mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. So it's lovely to see you, and Samhain is over. It ended yesterday. For those you may not realise that Samhain is the month of November here in Ireland, and now we are heading towards the solstice. So greetings from Costa Rica, Holland, Cheshire, Portugal, a chilly Slough. It's about 10 degrees, still warm here for Ireland. That's warm. Snowy Utah, oh my goodness. West Cornwall, Norfolk Island, Australia, British Columbia, Canada, London, Leicestershire, Edinburgh, Fife, wonderful, Washington. Lovely all to see you all and to be back here again. So I'll just see where else a few more people have come. New York and Southern Ohio. Belgium, you're also so welcome. So we are going to Ireland, to County Longford, and let me introduce you to my guest this evening, and it's Sean Clancy. Sean, you're very, very welcome.
Thank you so much, Eimear. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm nervous and my heart is going a mile a minute, but I'm really looking forward to it.
So I can hear that noise again, but I know it's not your heart. I know it's your computer.
No, it probably is. It's just winding up and down. It's an old machine now at this stage. I hope it lasts a day, actually.
Okay. So you're in County Longford. So just tell us what your landscape is like.
My landscape is flat, extremely, extremely flat. If anyone's familiar with Ireland, they call it the Great Bowl. So our outer rims typically are mountainous, and with the exception maybe of the Slievebill Mountains in your own native area, the rest of the country is predominantly flat. So I live bang in the centre of the country. I'm very close to the ancient sacred centre of Ireland. We'll talk about that later on. But from us, locally, we're quite adjacent to the River Shannon, and so several forests, including the Newcastle Forest, are quite famous now because it's the home to a Centre Parks. That's where I spent my youth, running around those trees. We're equidistant nearly to every angle of the country. So an hour and a half to Galway, an hour and a half to Dublin, 3 hours to Cork, 3 hours to Derry. Better road now to Belfast, but my wife's from Derry, so we make that road more often. But that's kind of given an geographic idea of where we are.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So I suppose, what is it that brought you, or how did you find Druidry? How did you find the order?
It's kind of always been on my radar. I come from a family tradition of extremely Catholic, but healers. So they would never class themselves as healers or as any way of Dina Fasta, but it was always going on in the background. So like my great granny would always, we called her granny, but my great granny would always have gone to mass every day, but at evening would be given advice on what to do. She'd beat out the rosary with everyone else, but in the evening we'll be warning people against going up that place. You'll annoy the She. This is what you need to do to heal this particular wound. Her own mother-in-law had been a bandfasta from Ballymote in County Sligo, and had been hassled a bit by the previous RIC. So when the new state was founded about 100 years ago, all of her sons became Gardaí. She literally grew up just below the caves of Kesh. So they were always
I know them, yes.
very conscious of the Cailleach, and she used to talk about not going out on Imbolug for fear they'd meet the Cailleach, because tradition was, Imbolug being the first week of February, and tradition was that if it was a dry day, that the Cailleach would have more time to gather more firewood, so you'd have a longer spring because she would make the winter last longer. But if the 2nd of February was a bad day, she wouldn't get much dry wood, so you'd have a short spring. So that then gave rise to the saying, every month curses a good February. But the tradition up there was that if you happen
can you repeat that again?
The tradition was that every month curses a good February. But the tradition up there then as well, if you ventured out and you happened to meet the Cailleach, you had to help her gather the wood. So you would then contribute to the long spring. So those kind of traditions filtered down. And then the family kind of bonded. And my mother's father's people then were Caseys, who came from the islands in Loughree, bang at the centre of Loughree in Claron, where Queen Maeve met her end. And they kind of had
so people actually living on the islands in Loughree?
No, not anymore. They lived there until people were living there until the 1950s. There's one island still habited, but it has a causeway, Saints Island. It was home to Cistercian monastery. That's where all the family are buried. But there's ring forts and rats and everything all the way through the islands. The islands were populated all the way through our history. They were actually seen as neutral territory in ancient times. So several meetings of high kings would have been held there, and that's why Maeve was killed there, because she'd gone on Tinge Claron during neutral times. Her nephew had seen her, had been practicing with the sling and how he was going to reclaim his mother's throne, and then what he had in his mouth was a piece of cheese. Picked it out of his mouth and used it in the sling and killed Maeve on Tinge Claron. So another story for another day. But it was all like Loughree, the Lake of the Kings, and it all tied in, and it was tied to then the ancient kingdom of Maja, the seat of the High Kings. But that tradition kind of carried through to the family. Like even till recent times, my great uncle Paddy lived in New York. He was a carpenter. Had worked for Harlan and Wolff, but had been a bit discriminated against in Belfast, so went off to America. But every summer he'd fly home to collect the burdock root to bring home. And every summer we're getting calls from customs. He was after being held up in customs. What's this in your baggage? So it's right until recent times. He passed there about 10 years ago, but that kind of tradition held. And then when I kind of ventured into looking into my own spiritual path, like again, very, very Catholic. You kind of grew up in the middle of this year, taught by the nuns, you taught music by the nuns. Like I learned to play the fiddle from a young age, but my full repertoire is church music because that's what was handy for them. That's it. I was taught by the same nuns, Sister Maura and Sister Agnes, the same nuns who taught Mick Foster and Alan how to play the concertina and the organ. Yeah, but so a great repertoire, great musicians, but just purely church based. And I went to college, got involved in several societies there in Galway. Actually, again, trying to seek a spiritual route at the time and being very, very antisocial. Like, not that I'm social, but I have severe social anxiety. So it was very handy just to sit in the back of the chapel because it's a nice, quiet space. You can talk to yourself or sit out in the quad in Galway. You're probably familiar with NUIG or UCG.
I was there.
Oh yeah, that's I had a feeling. You have that sense of a Galwegian, but those kind of spaces where you could be quiet for a while were fantastic. But the chapel was lovely, and then the priest there was great, Father Dermot at the time, Dermot Hogan. And he asked me one day, "You're here the whole time. I don't know a thing about you. Would you come over and consider being a Eucharistic minister?" And I thought, well, I'm here anyway, I might as well. And I did that a couple of times. I had a one-line conversation with Martin Sheen when he was there, because he came for a season.
The actor. Oh yes, right. He was in Galway.
He came for a season to study, same time around the same time as The Departed was released. And so my one-line conversation with Martin Sheen, Body of Christ, amen. But that was really it. And when I left college, I suddenly realised the whole Catholicism thing. Like, I have been lucky. The Catholic faith has been on a downward spiral, and I've been very lucky in my personal life that all the people I've known involved in it have been fantastic people. They've been great examples of what happens when it's done right.
Yeah.
But you hear it all drip, 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 and all the things that have been done wrong. And that there's so many benefits. Like, you've 2,000 years of people thinking about the big thoughts and what it means to be human and what it means to interact with the world and with the divine. But then you also have 2,000 years of mansplaining that and putting man's interpretation on that and man's laws on God's divine. And that doesn't work. And it wasn't sitting right with me. And in the background, there's always this family tradition of Well, we have worked with the land. We have worked with the spirits of the land. We don't just, the land isn't just an inanimate thing. It's very much alive, literally right down to the microorganisms and the humus. Like my granny would always take us out and she'd talk about the trees and how what particular trees would produce what types of mushrooms at the base, because that was the humus that was coming from their leaves and the chemicals, and how the trees would talk to each other. This is long before anyone was talking about mitochondrial networks, and it was just known. I think it was just known, but it was just day-to-day life. And I started looking back into that, and I decided I had to get closer to the earth, had to get into the earth. So where I am, I thought, do you know what? I'll go to her cave. Now, her cave is a cave in Tulse, County Roscommon, called Ognagach.
Oh, I know it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you probably do. The fit abode of the goddess Morrigan. It was always referred to as her cave, because the family would have said her cave.
So sorry, her cave, as in you know who she is.
Who she is, hers. It's yeah.
Okay.
They wouldn't mention the name. They wouldn't draw it down. Like, they were always very cautious. The line was always said, the she, you treat them with caution because these are former gods and they want to be gods again. And like I say, they always said, do you believe in the she? I don't, but I'm not going to cut down that tree because that's sacred to them. Those kind of things you would dance around.
So I just want to come back because you're speaking so quickly.
Sorry.
That you respect the she because they want to become gods again.
Well, not just that, but you have to realize that these were for the she here. We're not talking about Tinkerbell when we talk about Irish fairies.
No, yeah.
And I say this to you, it's the last person I need to say it to. But I'm conscious because one of my aspects of my life, I'm a tour guide, so I often have American tourists coming on and we show them a fairy tree and they talk, oh, the fairies. And no, we're not talking about Tinkerbell here. This is a whole other aspect.
Yes.
These are the two of the Danann and the several levels of the she. These are former gods and these want to be gods again. And I always apply to Terry Pratchett. I don't know if you've read much of his books, but I think someday he'd be considered a theologian of paganism. But the idea is that belief exists, and when you tap into it, you can call things into being through belief. And likewise, things will diminish and grow due to belief. And you see that yourself in your own garden. The plants you go out and you spend time with and you believe in, they're the ones that will prosper when you put in that spiritual photosynthesis into it. It's fantastic. And so, sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. Where was I going?
You went to Uvnagat.
Yes, so I decided one day I'm going to look. I need to connect to the earth. Where better to do it than in Uvnagat? Now you've been there, so I'll throw it out to the rest of the audience because I know some of you have been there. It's a cave. It's 7 meters down, massive. Excuse if anyone takes offense to this, but I was described to me as a massive vulva-shaped cathedral. This shape coming up to the divine feminine. 7 meters down. If you want to experience perfect darkness, perfect silence, you go in there. You just hear the drips, and you enter into an entrance under a hawthorn tree that's about the size of a kitchen table, and you slide down into a man-made chamber. Now, it's actually we talk about souterrains, which are underground tunnels, and they're very popular across Ireland. They were used in ancient times both for storage and for protection during warfare. But this was a man-made souterrain entering into a natural cavern and cave, which in ancient times people believed went on forever, which the monks, when they Christianized everything, regarded as the gates to hell. And it was seen as the fit abode of the goddess Morrigan. In ancient times, it was seen as a place of challenges. And the name itself, the Cave of the Cats. Sorry, I'm losing my thing. Uvnagat.
Can you just speak a little bit more slowly? Some people are saying you're too fast.
Sorry, I do speak fast, and I'm not as eloquent or as clearly talking as Eimear is.
I speak quickly too.
Oh no, come on. So Uvnagat, Gotch in Old Irish. When the monks told the tales, they talked about the herds of demon cats emerging from the cave, and of a puka coming out called the Puka Nasmerin. And the puka is a shape-shifting demon or shape-shifting horse of the two a day who would come out, and on a Halloween night at Samhain, he would breed poison in all the berries, so you don't eat the berries after Samhain. Now that's just good advice because they're all gone off realistically, but that's the story that was given to this cave to ward people off, because the true meaning of this cave was the fit abode of the goddess Morrigan, the goddess of battles, the goddess of death. The fit abode of the goddess Morrigan, her dwelling place, and it's a fascinating place to enter, and cautiously you always enter. And the reason I go back to the name again, because the name of Uvnagat in ancient Irish, Gotch was the word for battle. It's actually the cave of the battles.
Oh, okay.
Think about the Cot Moitura, Clontarf, Uv na Coch. It is a place of offering and a place of blood. And even over the entranceway now, there's a hawthorn tree, so it's very difficult to get in without getting cut a little bit. So you do leave a little piece in there. So you slide down into this darkness and this chamber, and there's a small bit of light coming in. And as you come in, there's an Ogham stone just above the lintel, and carved into that is the words "Freach, son of Maeve." Carved in Latin, I think. Because by the time Owen came around, they were using early Latin. So it is in the last 1800 years. But Freach, son of Maeve, is carved into this little stone. And then you leave the man-made world. And you scramble over a small pile of stones, and the darkness descends, and you drop down a couple of chambers. And along one side, you'll see where a former president vandalized his name into the wall of this ancient chamber, Douglas Hyde, though he was local and he was a young man.
I never saw it.
Douglas Hyde, on the left-hand side as you're going in, D. Hyde is described. It was sometime in the 1900s. It was a young man, but he was from French Park, so it's just up the road.
Okay.
And you slide down over another scramble, because this cave has fallen through several times. And suddenly into this chamber, you go down, and it's about 12-15 meters to the back. And I always say, always bring a second torch, because if you lose the torch you have no way of finding it. And turn off the light. And it's perfect black. And it's perfect silence, bar the dripping of the water. And then suddenly you become conscious of how loudly you're breathing.
Yeah.
So you breathe a little bit softer. Then you stop breathing. And you can hear your blood boiling in your skin, in your body, and your blood moving around. And you become so conscious of this. And it becomes a battle of the mind. And in ancient times, that's where the great heroes had to go to prove they were heroes. So it's talked about Cuchulainn and Fergus MacRae and Ferdia all having to go into that chamber and spend the night there. Like, I've gone in and meditated in there, but I couldn't last more than half an hour to an hour at most. I can't imagine spending the night there. So this was my second ever time going there. I'd been there previously with a family member. And as I was coming out, I'd taken more time than I should have, and there was a very tall, very angry woman standing outside when I got out. And I apologized and went about my way. I went up the visitor center.
Apologize for what?
For having, I felt I'd been encroaching on her time, and I think I went in barefoot. Sorry, I had gone in barefoot, so I left my shoes at the door, at the entranceway. So she had been waiting outside for whoever had left her shoes there to come out to gather them. So she'd known I was there. And so I came out and went up to the visitor center in Tulsk, the visitor center for the Red Cross. The Red Cross is a massive complex. It was the ancient capital of Connacht. So a series of mounds. It's well worth a visit. And the visitor center is fantastic. And I went in and started browsing through the books. And there was a book there, Irish Witchcraft by an Irish Witch, and a companion piece, Practical Guide to Irish Spirituality, both by Laura O'Brien. I thought these seemed very interesting. It was the Practical Guide to Irish Spirituality that really caught, because that was the reason I was there, and literally hit a light bulb. Go for it. And so I picked up the book and picked up the companion book, Practical Guide to the Irish Witchcraft and Irish Witch, and bought them and headed out and started researching and reading. This is fascinating. Started going through YouTube channels, and then Laura O'Brien was the doorway to me to getting into a more focused pagan path, and started Googling her. And so realized, okay, she's got a very busy YouTube channel, lots of detail. Started following it, doesn't realize this. Okay, that's actually the woman who was standing outside the cave when I came out. I've only met her in person once, and that was this summer. And I had a bit of a fanboy moment when I met her at Asia this summer. So I didn't quite introduce myself. I kind of wilted away, but that was the doorway to that. And so I started engaging more with the places around me. And the big one for me, because of where I'm located, is the ancient hill of Uisneach, the centre of Ireland, the sacred centre of Celtic Europe, the sacred religious centre of Celtic Europe, some would say, the home of the Bealtaine fire festivals at the start of summer. It was said it was a place where the ancient Irish Druids were said to live year round, the resting place of the goddess Eru, and the mortal resting place of the great god Lu, the sun god. So I'd always visited there as a family member. Again, back to our terrain, we are flat. And Uisneach pops up just that little bit. It's only about 500 meters above sea level, but because everything else is so flat, from the summit of Uisneach, you can see 20 counties.
Wow.
Again, Ireland's not overly big, but it's a big vista, and it's fascinating sight. So I started visiting more often, And back when I was a child, there was at the bottom of the hill on the roadway, there was a stile. You could just walk up and go to Eimear, the Stone of Divisions.
Yeah.
In common parlance, is known as the cat stone because it looks like a cat pouncing over a mouse or playing with a mouse. In ancient Irish, it was Eimear, the Stone of the Divisions, and that was where Eru, the goddess of the land, was said to rest. So I was starting to visit this site more often and connect to the site. And then in 2010-11, the landowner changed and David Clark bought the land and decided to rehold the Beltane Fire Festivals. Sorry, I need to take a moment. Actually, I think David might have bought it before that, but it was around 2010, 2011 that they started reholding the festivals. And I was a member, I was leading the local scout troop. So I thought, hang on, I can be of use to you here, practical use. So I contacted Justin Moffat, who was running the site, and I said, look, I have this group of kids who love lighting fires. How can we help you? So he sent us off to the other hills to light the fires, but ultimately we got entrance and access to the fire festival and could help out. And we did that for 2 or 3 years. And it was fantastic. It was great to be involved. The festival itself was just kindling at that stage. So they were trying it out as a spiritual event. Let's see if we can have a bit of music. Let's see if we can have a bit of a sideshow, a bit more music. Oh, here's a guy selling beer. After 2 or 3 years, it got out of hand, and they realized, hang on, this is not what we want to have here. We want to have a spiritual aspect. We want to cherish and show our sacred site for what it is. And so they rolled it back. I think 2013 was a wet year anyway, so it wasn't held that year. And they used that as a chance to roll it back. So since that, it's been a much more spiritual ceremony, but fantastic. Like, you will still get about 5,000 to 6,000 people will gather on the hill. They'll light the fires, they'll process them to the summit, and they'll light the great fire. And before that, there'll be ceremony all day. There'll be people dancing around Eimear. There'll be people doing healing sessions, people leading chants, people doing drumming. It's a great site to connect and to grow and to meet community. And then, just as the sun starts to set, they'll process up the hill, and the female druids will process from Eru's site, from Eimear, and the male aspects will process from Lou's side, from Carndor. The Uisneach is a jewel summited hill. So the male aspect and the female aspect are both combined on the hill, but the centre of it, the true aspect of it, is around Eimear. The summit lies in the middle, and they'll meet just before that, and they'll proceed up. And the tradition is that the most senior ranking individual on the hill will light the fire. So we were lucky in 2017 we had Brian O'Hare and Michael D. Higgins, the President of Ireland, came and he lit it. Yeah. So actually, you were there yourself that year.
That was there. The only time I was there, yeah.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Just to see the hill alive again. And that fire was up. And like in ancient times, the law was the four. Everyone here will be aware of the 4 ancient fire festivals. So Imbolc, which was the awakening of spring, the fire dedicated to Bridget, and a fire would be lit on Croghan Hill in County Offaly to mark someone out. That's what Imbolc literally means, full of belly. So it told the farming communities, these were all agrarian purposes. So the druids living on Uisneach were the ones watching the sky, the ones with the knowledge. They were saying, okay, the wheel of the year is turning. So now we need to light this fire to tell them, now it's time of Imbolc. Now you need to be ready that your cows are going to have their calves, your ewes are about to have their lands, and now you need to start tilling the soil and doing your heavy planting. And as the wheel would turn, and the great cairns at Lough Crew would light up for the equinox. Say, okay, now we've hit the time of balance, the equinox. And the sun has lit these chambers, so now we can do our more delicate planting, the seeds that can't handle the frosts. And then the wheel would turn, and suddenly the fire would be lit from Uisneach to announce Bealtaine. Bealtaine was critical, because that was the time the heavy work was done. Now Eru was at her most fertile. The land was doing her work. So now the people could rest. The people could gather. They could come together to make their laws, to negotiate, to foster out children, because they used to foster children between tribes. A great way to avoid warfare was for you to raise my kids and and me to raise yours, kind of thing. And they'd come together, and that would all happen on Uisneach. So that fire was lit on the summit of Uisneach, and the law was that every fire had to be quenched in advance. And when that fire went up, each of the hills around would light up. And I remember when we were the scouts lighting the fire, it was fantastic. It felt like that scene in The Lord of the Rings. It was, send the warning fire to Gondor. And the fire went up, and we saw it coming and chained towards us, and we lit ours. Oh, yay! And then sent it on, and it was brilliant. But then when you're standing on the summit of Uisneach, when you're standing in that crowd at the core of it, and you're celebrating the area, when you're celebrating the coming summer, and the druids are dancing, and the drums are pounding, and that fire goes up. And then suddenly you realise the whole of Ireland is looking at you. 20 counties are looking at you. and you see that ring of fire go up, you realize it's not a line of fire, it's a ring of fire, and a ring of fire, concentric rings getting wider and wider, taking up the whole land. In 2017, they actually got it the whole way to Mount Bandon in County Kerry. That chain, the whole way to the tip of the country. It was fantastic. And like it was written in the 6th century that Eru's fire eye shines bright for Bealtaine Eve. Eru's fire eye shines bright for Bealtaine Eve. Now that's an English translation on an ancient Irish script. But the fire eye, that is like the eye of fire, the eye, the center of the land. And that's why it was so important, because especially in a tradition that was held where everything was held together orally, like you didn't write down your laws, you didn't write down your negotiations. So the tribes had to come together to negotiate, and in enough crowds. And there's actually, you could divide Uisneach into 3 portions. You have the kingship portion around the palace. Then you have the spiritual sites around Ulnamurn, the summit, and Carnluddoch, where Lugh lies. And then kind of to the northwestern portion, you had, say, the secular site where the traders would come and the general day-to-day people would come and gather. And in the middle of that, there's this massive amphitheatre. If you come on the tours, we kind of walk around it and we'll show a stone where the announcements would have been made from. And there's a acoustic anomaly there that on a clear day, just speaking normally, can be heard the whole way across the valley. It's fantastic.
Wow.
But they've done measures there. They reckon that valley could have held about 80,000 people, about the same size as Cork Park. But Cork Park's a national stadium for anyone outside of Ireland. And you can see the layout. Okay, that's where they could have had chariot races. That's where they could have had hurling matches. And everyone would gather there. And then...
Can you slow down?
Oh, sorry. And everyone would have...
There are people, from Europe whose English isn't their first language. And they're enjoying it. They're saying this guy's a great storyteller. So people are enjoying it, but just hard to understand because you're so fast. It's
something I get so excited about. I just go. And actually, I got warned to Frances, the hill manager. I was asked her this morning, would she mind if I mentioned Uisneach on the thing? She said, of course, go ahead. Just slow down. It's the biggest thing.
Well done, Frances.
I'm so excited. I can just get running. But so they would, everyone would gather, say, in that amphitheatre. And if you had, in an oral tradition, if nothing's written down, how do you know something's the law? You only know it if enough people have heard it that you can't lie about it. If you've made a deal, you can't renege on it if enough people know that that's the deal. Okay. So everyone coming together at Bealtaine was important because you could set out the laws. All the tribe would know the laws. All the tribes would know who was dealing with who, which tribes, which kingdoms had allied with who was going to marry who, things like that. And as well as that, all the kings would gather. And tradition is that there's 2 roadways up the southern side of Uisneach. There's your day-to-day farm road, which includes a village which was lived in about the 1950s, and there's a lovely fairy story to tell about that sometime if anyone's willing. And then there's the other road, which is the ancient ceremonial roadway. Now, archaeologists are currently negotiating that, whether it holds to the stories that go with it. Some people believe it's late medieval. The tradition would be that it's early medieval. And the tradition that goes with it is that it could only be used upon the Great Fair of Bealtaine, and you could only travel it if invited by the High King of Ireland. Oh. If you use any other time, there was a geish put upon you and your family for 7 generations. Now, a geish would be a curse or an obligation. It could be a curse that your hair would fall out, and so 7 generations of the men would be bald. Or it could be an obligation that you couldn't refuse hospitality to a red-haired woman, and something like that. Sorry, I'm getting indigestion again. I'm getting nervous.
You're doing really well. Just slow down.
So the High King, the tradition said, would send out an invite to the tribes to invite the tribes to come who he wanted to negotiate. Now, Uisneach was one of the seats of the High Kings. The High Kings of Ireland had 2 seats, Tara being the secular site and Uisneach being the sacred site. To be High King, you had to be crowned to the land. You had to be crowned for the people at Tara and crowned to the land at Uisneach, spiritually. And secondly, crowned to the masculine at Tara. That's to the Neofoil, the aspect of the masculine.
Yeah.
Crowned, married to Eru at Uisneach. I didn't do that on purpose. This happened to be up on one above the other at Uisneach. So Uisneach being one of the seats of the High Kings, they would send out an invite, inviting the tribes to come. And the invite that was sent out was a ring of red gold mined from somewhere in County Wicklow. And so they gathered, and if you come, the car park at the bottom of the hill would have been the mustering point. So you came, and the warriors polished up their finery. First of all, they would have to go to the Bridget Well above the road. The Bridget Well was a cleansing site. So
that's the heart-shaped one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is a fascinating site. Everyone talks about Bridget of Kildare, but it was Geoffrey of Monmouth, who the Welsh British historian, who first mentioned it, and he was a friend of Hugh de Lacy, one of the initial conquestors, and de Lacy had a fortress in Kildare, which is known. Geoffrey of Monmouth stayed at. De Lacy wasn't able to take Uisneach, but he ringed it with castles. There's like 17 castles within 5 kilometers of it, but he was not able to take Uisneach itself, but he rung it in. And he rung the whole of Meath. He took Royal Meath being the seat of the High Kings, and he rung it in castles. And Trim would be the principal one if anyone wants to come. It is your, oh my God, castle.
Beautiful castle.
Oh yeah, up there with Kilkenny. Only Kilkenny's been kept going.
Yeah.
And so that well, it was said that was where Bridget had her divine waters. And there was a church built there in the 4th century by the first of the Clan O'Neill to join the Catholic faith. His name was Hugh in translated English. Yeah. And so Kildare came from Kil-A, or Hugh's church. At that site, he built 4 churches. One dedicated to our Lord, one dedicated to the Holy Spirit, one dedicated to himself, and the third one he called Champlebridge. It wasn't
Bridget's Temple.
It wasn't a church, it was Bridget's Temple because it was built on the site of a pre-existing temple to the goddess Bridget. Ooh. And if you were coming, that Tartship well is at least 6,000 years old, and the ruins around it. Ooh. The ruins around it are from about 400 AD, so they're still ancient. But in regards to the life of that well itself, it's just astounding. And like my professional career, I was the environmental engineer for the local authority, so I tested the water in that well. It is some of the purest water in the country. It's incredible. It has it's remunerative healing aspects as well.
Is it associated with a particular ailment?
I can't remember. It's just something I should actually remember. I think it's to do with ear deficiencies and ear and throat. Okay. I can't remember why. I know the rest of the Uisneach crew are screaming at me in the background now.
You should know this, is it?
I do know this. That's the worst thing. But that well is just an incredible sight. But it's said that the pilgrims if you're coming to Uisneach for a pilgrimage purpose, you had to go there first to be purified. So any water you carried would be poured out there, and the Druids would take your vessel, fill it from the well, cleanse you, and then refill it for you to carry that water forward. And then you processed up, and you got to the bottom of the hill, and you polished up your weapons, you got your pipers out, and you got your drummers going, and you marched up the hill. And the High King, when the archaeologists surveyed the palace, they found a platform where the High King would watch you coming up this causeway, this anyway. And the tribal king would approach and come to the High King. And the tribute he gave back was the tribute he'd been sent out. That ring of red gold was handed back to the High King. But if you were feeling brave that year, if you're feeling strong, you thought, you know what, I could have a go at this. You went up to the High King and you looked him in the eye, and you dropped the ring of red gold in his goblet. And that's how he knew you were going to challenge him for the High Kingship that year. And the last time that happened was 1,020 years ago this year, when Brian Brew challenged Malachy Mór O'Donnell, the last of the O'Neill High Kings.
And he won.
He won. Well, they were already allies and already gone to war twice. Now, Malachy himself was an incredible High King. He had beaten Olaf Kern, the Viking King of Dublin. He'd beaten Melmorda of Leinster, stolen the wife of one and the mother of the other, who was the same person, who then left him and went to marry Brian, and then they fell out. So it was Gormla, ancient times, mad to crack. But they were allies, and then they fell out, and they were allies again. But Malachy was from the O'Neill clans. There was 4 O'Neill clans. 2 ruled Ulster, 2 ruled Meath. And when Niall was on his deathbed, he said he made his sons promise they would never war. So that every second High Kingship would come from Ulster or Meath. So for about 500 years previous to this, it had either been Ulster, Meath, Ulster, Meath. So Malachy was the last Meath High King. And the Ulster kings were looking at him thinking, he's been on the throne now for about 17 years. We could do with his head in the ground. So they weren't going to support him. Leinster wasn't going to support him. Here was Munster coming against him. And Brian, again, was married to the daughter of the King of Connacht at this stage. This is his 3rd wife, who was the daughter of the King of Connacht. 2 had died in childbirth. So Malachy knew he wasn't going to be able to defeat Brian. So he invited them into the king's house. And when you come to Uisneach, we'll show you the king's house is still there. Like, this is a stoned walled house in a land where people were living in clay and wattle until about 150 years ago. It's incredible.
That recent. Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's still some clay and wattle buildings around. It's just, if they're preserved and maintained, they keep going. But literally, until the famine period, that's why there's so many, you can see the divots of famine houses.
Oh, wow.
But so little was stone. And back then, stone walls up to about 6 feet and then up to 17 feet of a thatched roof. And you imagine you're invited into the chamber. And so just before you come in, somebody stokes up the fire. So the sparks are glinting off the weapons and the tapestries inside. And you walk in and looking across the fire, you see the glinting eyes of the High King of Ireland. And sitting to his right then would be the King of Leinster. Beyond that, the King of Connacht, King of Munster over there. To your left, your cousin, the King of Ulster. And you walk in and you sit down, and they're all seated. It's a round house, and they all sit an arm and a swords length apart. So that if I say something you don't like, or you say something I don't like, I can't just pull my sword and lob your head off. You have to come in to negotiate. And Bealtaine was a neutral time. There was no warfare at Bealtaine. You had to negotiate. So Brian, Malachy, it said Malachy entered the palace. Brian followed him. Malachy took his seat, and Brian watched Brian enter. I said that it was only the second time in our tradition this has happened. That when Brian entered, Malachy stood up and shuffled over and sat down to the seat to the right and invited Brian to take the seat of the High King. The only time that had happened previously was when Nuada of the Tuatha Dé Danann had shuffled over to Laulu to become High King.
Wow.
So anyway, sorry, I'm ranting on.
No, I have to go now and have you guide me and fill me into the stories where.
Oh, look, the guides are incredible. Like, they're so fantastic. The knowledge, like I'm always conscious when telling the stories. I can barely scratch the surface. Like, realistically, we have 6,000 years of archaeology on the hill. We have potentially up to 10,000 years of history and folklore and mythology. Like, on the Murren, that great stone, the cat stone, that was dropped there by the retreating ice from the last ice age. It has been untouched by the hand of man for 10,000 years, bar one. The only person to ever damage that stone inside that sacred temple of the Divine Feminine was Eamon de Valera, the former president of Ireland. But then, when did he ever care about the Divine Feminine?
How did he do that? What did he do?
He drilled a hole in the top to drive a flag into it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was during the presidential run. Like, every single major event in our history has passed through that site. Like, we know Daniel O'Connell spoke to a crowd of 18,000 there. Parnell spoke there.
Wow.
We know Pearse and Connolly spoke there. Michael Collins was invited to speak there as well. But on the day he was supposed to be there, he was in England breaking De Valera himself out of prison. And then back in the 1940s, De Valera came and spoke there. So it's that. But again, this is just a blip in the history of that site. It's incredible. Like,
wow.
It's I have to stress it to everyone. And again, that's kind of why I became a member, because in my capacity as being a guide there, so many members have come. And I love about the site. People come and you tell them the stories, and something resonates with somebody. And suddenly you hear a version. Oh, do you know what? They talked about that in our tradition at home. And it's something very similar, but a different name, a different face. But the stories are the same. And everywhere from Japan to India to Native America, the stories are the same. It's just different faces, different versions. It just shows like the people of the world are the people of the world. And these stories are like, say the Tuatha Dé Danann would have been the Indo-European peoples, most likely the Bronze Age people, the bright and shining people coming after the Stone Age with modern weapons, suddenly bright and shiny. It makes sense from that aspect of it. And those stories are right the way across the whole of Europe. It's amazing. But and then when people come, and especially I found with OBOD members, that's kind of pulled me. They come and that connection, not just to the stories, but also to the land. You take your shoes off and you stand with your bare feet on the soil there, and you feel that tingle of power. Like, whether you believe it or not, there's enough belief put in the soil there over thousands of years that it comes back up when you stand there. Like, I'll never forget, going back to the Catholic past again, the first visit to St. Peter's Square, and I'm sure a lot of people remember this, if you walk into the colonnades of St. Peter's Square in Rome, even when it's completely, my first visit there was 10 o'clock at night, there was nobody there but 3 or 4 policemen, myself and my uncle. We walked in, and just this sense of the aspects of wow, you can feel that energy coming through, that all the energy that's been put in this place comes at you. But St. Peter's Square is 1,500 years old. The current one's only about 500 years old.
Yeah.
You stand in that enclosure around down in the Murren and Uisneach, that's 6,000 years old. 6,000 years of belief and faith and love and power and law and rule and sovereignty put in that site. It's incredible. And it comes back out at you. You can't ignore it. So
no, I agree. Well, I tell you, there's going to be, you're selling Uisneach really, really well.
Oh, I hope so.
I mean, and it's what I'm getting is people are saying that you should be singing. You're singing it. That they're saying you should be doing audiobooks. There's great reactions here too.
Oh, if I could speak clearly, I would.
You're speaking with such. So Neem, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name, says tingling just listening to you. Gabriella says prepare for visitors. But you're speaking with such enthusiasm and such passion. It's like, I want to go there tomorrow. I can't, but it's that
I know.
you're oozing Ishnok out of you. It's just lovely.
Well, that's the one thing I'd say to anyone who wants to visit. Please do. Like, if put it on the bucket list. We love having people from all over the world. The website is there. I'll show you the picture. If to try and describe how to spell it to a non-Irish person, it can be awkward. But like, even come to the festival.
It's been spelled. Somebody spelled it in the chat.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, exactly.
So, is it open every day?
Open every day during the summer, bar Mondays. There's a tour every day during the summer except Mondays, and in wintertime we have a tour every Sunday, and all the fire festivals. So and all the cross quarters as well. So I'm leading the ceremonies and the tour. Since they realized, oh, Sean, you're studying to be a Jew. Do you know any ceremonies? But I used to do the old family ceremonies. So since I joined, thanks, Francis, every fire festival or every ceremony since, they've asked me just to lead a little thing on the summit after the sun is set or after they've lit the fire. So on the winter solstice this year, I'll be leading the tour and we'll be doing a small ceremony afterwards. Now, if it's dry, we'll be going right up. If it's wet, we'll be doing most of it in the center. But like the center is fantastic. It's a lovely little environment, just close quarters, but very much of the earth, and great place to bond and get to know people. But when you come to Uisneach, you want to be on the hill. So hopefully it's a dry day. And I've always found as well, I've been lucky that the days I've told the story of Lou, well, the sun has shone. The days I've mucked it up, we've got lashed out of it and come down the hill wet. So if I tell the story well on the day, it works out. But it's worth coming. And actually, it's auspicious today. They've just released the dates for this year's Fire Festival for Bealtaine. So we'll be celebrating it on the 6th of May this year. Tickets are just, if you want to get the early bird tickets. Sorry, I'm becoming a salesman here. If you want to get the early bird tickets, get in now. But join go to the website, subscribe for the Friends of Uisneach, and they'll send you the email, and that'll include a link to where you can buy the early bird tickets. It's limited to about 5,000 people. When you're on the hill, you suddenly realize how big this site is. Like, to our ancestors, it was a practical site as well as being a sacred. Literally, it's the sacred centre of Ireland. For thousands of years, people believed it was the actual centre of Ireland. And in recent OS Ordnance Survey studies, they've actually discovered that for 6,000 years, people were only out by 3 kilometres. Considering all the islands and all the inlets and all only out by 3 kilometres. But when you're there, you realise suddenly, for our ancestors, as well as being sacred and spiritual, it was practical, because you have a massive plateau bang in the middle of the country, off the Escariada, that ancient ridgeway, just beside Sliena Hostel, the ancient road from Tara to Rathcroghan, and you could fit thousands of people safely, comfortably, and loads of space. Like, we have 5,000 people for the Fire Festival every summer. You feel like you're in the middle of a lovely big crowd and you're there. Then you see the aerial images coming out and like, oh my God, it's tiny. You realize how big this can be. The compounding issue there is planning permission. If you go over 5,000 people, you have to get planning permission for an event. But also that you don't want to damage the sacred site. You don't want to damage the historical site. And Uisneach is currently part of an application with the other royal sites of Ireland to seek UNESCO status, and we're very, very close. So the other 5 royal sites of Ireland would be Awanwaka in Armagh, the seat of the Kings of Ulster, Rathcroghan in Connacht, the seat of the Kings of Connacht at Tulsk. That's where Uachnagoch is. There's a solar alignment there as well, actually. I'll talk about that in a minute. Then you had the Rock of Cashel, which everyone will be familiar with down in Munster. Dunallagna, outside Kilcullen in Leinster, which would have been the seat of the Kings of Leinster. And then, of course, Tara, the seat of the High Kings, the secular seat of the High Kings. Some people believe Uisneach was the seat before Tara, because it goes back to one of the first historical kings being Tuathail Teachmar, who built the palace on Uisneach. And you can still come and visit the palace. It's a conjoined ring fort. We're lucky in this country. We have the largest medieval landscape in the world. Largest early medieval landscape. Everyone in this land is familiar with ring forts and dunes and castles. And so many of them have become known as fairy forts. And for that reason, they've been protected, because people were nervous and respectful of the Sidhe of the fairies. So they would never destroy them. Very rarely did they destroy them. And so that landscape is preserved. We have nearly 60,000 ring forts in the land. But of those 60,000, only those 5 are conjoined ring forts. They're a figure of 8. And Uisneach is one of those, the Palace of Uisneach.
Okay.
That's worth coming to see. Sorry, I'm going off one again.
Oh, it's brilliant. Absolutely fascinating. Do you want to show us some photographs, or is this the time? Or have you more things? More things to tell us about Uisneach?
Oh, I couldn't stop. There's so much to go. This started with a question about how I joined the order. And I was saying, yeah, one question in, I've taken 44 minutes.
No, it's brilliant. People are loving it. It's
Yeah,
just, I'm really enjoying this.
Like the reason I joined the order in the end, it's meeting so many wonderful people from Obot on the site. And like, as I said, when you start studying paganism and Irish spirituality, for me, it was Irish spirituality first, and then spread into paganism. Then it's like, oh, here's Wicca. What's Wicca like? Look into that. Okay, really not for me. The whole thoughts of having to work in groups and initiation. Okay, that's a bit, oh, you initiate with what? Okay, not for me at the moment. I appreciate where you're coming from. I looked into other aspects, and suddenly meeting the lovely Obot people on the hill. And then this is all fantastic. They're nice grounded people, but it all feels, and I'm sorry, this is going to sound very Irish nationalist, but I was very conscious it all felt very English.
Very English, yeah.
It all felt very English until you realise, till you get in there. And like coming from a post-colonial, post-Catholic Ireland, you don't want to go down that route until you do your research. And then one day they elected a woman from Kilkenny as the chosen chief. And that was suddenly like, okay, hang on, is it that English? Started looking a bit deeper. And then one day last winter, I was chatting to one of the guides. And I would actually mention this. I thought, look into it. It looks fascinating. And I've looked at some of the research and some of the papers they cite, and they talk about our spirituality, Welsh spirituality, pan-European spirituality. There's an awful lot taught in there. And I've read a lot of Philip's books, and they're very well grounded, extremely well thought out. And I started watching the podcasts, and I started watching the Tea with a Druid, and I started watching the Fireside Chats, and I started listening to Dave the Bard, and thought, you know what, these are fantastic people. There's so much sense and community here. And it was the ideal time because, again, I'm antisocial. I didn't have to go anywhere. I could just log on and watch and feel like a sense of the community and join in the chats. And you know what? I might as well join. And I was chatting to one of the guides, Simon Chute, and he said, you know, Ronald Hutton's a member. And again, when you suddenly see somebody of that academic status, like coming from Uisneach, meeting archaeologists all the time, meeting historians all the time, meeting these people who dismiss, oh, they're all neo-pagans, it's all not new, and then suddenly, well, actually, you know what, oh, but they don't pretend to be anything they're not. They're about trying to find it out, trying to learn, trying to think together, work together, grow together. And then suddenly hearing, hang on, Ronald Hutton's a member, and having read his books and like The Triumph of the Sun, and it was okay. So then in April I signed up. And it was fantastic. Straight away, got straight into the Guernsey. Took way too long for the first few months because I was just going through it, trying to, okay, I need to integrate this, work through it. So what it should have taken a week was taking me 3 or 4 weeks. And then suddenly got 1 or 2 nights where I had a build up of Guernsey, so suddenly flashed through them all in one night and thinking, no, hang on, need to go back and go through all of those again and actually integrate it and work through it. And it was fantastic. And then one day an ad popped up from Anna the Cooch throwing off about Asia, the gathering in Clara. So, do you know what? Again, I'm so antisocial. I don't go to. I've been lucky with Uisneach because everyone comes to me. I can put on my cloak and carry out my loose spear and put on this performance that I've just given you all. This is all a performance. I do not talk comfortably with people. I stay in the background and stay quiet. And I said, do you know what? I'm going to go. And I went. And it was fantastic. I have to say, absolutely fantastic. Even from the first moment getting out of the car. And I arrived at the same moment as a woman from Donegal called Sherry Scott.
Oh, yes.
And Sherry was fantastic, straight over, full of life, full of beans, with Maria Coleman as well. I've become very close with. Just absolutely, just draws you in. Yes. And went in and started chatting to Anna. And now I knew of Anna. Anna didn't know me, but I knew of Anna from her doing ceremonies in Uisneach. And I'd always been blown away. And then in the corner, coming out of this van, oh my God, there's Eimear Burke. I was like, I like the first time I saw you was at the Uisneach to Standing Rock celebration, and it was just,
oh really? That was great.
Like that's one of the things about Uisneach. First, peoples from all across the world see it as a sacred site. They see their own sacred sites, and they see that as a kinship site. So that's why it's so critical. But then so there you were, and it was in class just actually be able to sit in ceremony with people, actually feel part of that, not feel like I'm, oh, that guy in the corner, he's being weird, he's dragging down the vibe of the whole place. Actually being able to contribute and join in, it was fantastic. And then sitting in the,
I never noticed that you were.
I was so conscious, just trying to, I thought I'm going to push myself now to try to get in without being in people's faces. And then in the night court is absolutely fantastic. Like literally sitting around at 3 a.m, where you were telling that last story of Mish was just like tears rising. Like, it was absolutely incredible. Like I'd seen your video of it before, but to hear it in person, it was just incredible. So like I'm fully invested now. I'm in the order. I'm going to keep going. And thank you, because it has been such a relief to have community around, because it's a solitary route. It is such a solitary route when you break from a major religion.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing. Like we still baptize our children because it's that sense of community. It's when you baptize into the Catholic faith in Ireland, it's not just that you're joining the church, you're joining your local community. It's the same as joining your local football club. You're blending in. There's also the benefit you're more likely to get into the local school if the kids are Catholic. But it is that sense of community. And then when you break and go solo, and suddenly it's very, very, like my wife has told me I'm a different person in the last 5 years. Like I've been on this route.
Is she happy with you?
I think so. It's debate. Like I've been on this route for about 12 to 15 years.
Yeah.
Like I didn't talk about my big breakthrough moment, and I might go to that later. Actually, do you mind if I do now? Because otherwise I'll forget.
Absolutely. This is your story. Yeah. Sean, this is all about you.
It's quite a personal one, and it goes back to the 10th of the 10th, 2010. And this was not long, about 2 years after the whole picking up Laura O'Brien's books and starting to delve into the Irish paganism and learning about it. And I was still very heavily involved in the local church. I guess, in fairness, I still sing in the local choir. My mother conducts it, so I can't really escape. But it's it is part of the parsonage. But then on the 10th of the 10th, 2010, a very close family friend called Burr, she's from Alsace, and she's an extremely spiritual person, and used to get, she called them angels, but these light body visitations. And she had been told by one of her guides that she had to be at the Sacred Centre of Ireland at 10 o'clock on the 10th of the 10th, 2010. 10. I wish I was making this up, because people think, oh yeah, it's scatty. So she came, and she stayed with a very close family friend the night before, and on 10 o'clock on 10, went to Tara, stood with her arms around the leafoil, and nothing happened. And she came home, and on the second night she was supposed to be staying with my uncle, who lived next door to me. And she came, and I was living in Galway at the time, and my now wife, then girlfriend, so we travelled home to meet Burr because we hadn't seen her in ages. She owns a vineyard in France, so she'd come home fully stocked. So we got home around 9:15 that night, and everyone was well into the stock that came home. They're all weepy, and oh, this didn't happen. What were we expecting? So they hadn't told me why she was home. I just knew she was home. I said, well, if anything was going to happen, it wouldn't have happened to Tara. It would have been another stock, like you said, the Sacred Centre. And she said, well, where's Ushnock? I said, it's just up the road, literally 6 miles as the crow flies. So I, being the sober one, bundled everyone at the back of the car, and we headed off. And this is before I was very familiar with David and the crew. So I just got up and chanced my arm, and we drove up the hill, drove up to where the earth is in the hill. And I said, I really hope the farmers are going to get angry about this. And now I was watching the clock, because thinking this is heading for 9:45. And if you're familiar with Ushnock, it's about, the whole tour, we'll say, it takes about 3 kilometres. So driving up the hill, cut a chunk out of that, literally sprinted across the top of the hill over to Ulnamuran.
Yeah.
I arrived then with, surprisingly, it looking back, it feels like time stood still, because to get from the car to where we got to should have taken about 15-20 minutes. And yet we got there with about 10 minutes to spare. Like
yes.
Again, yeah, I don't want to throw any aspersions on it, but that's kind of thing. And as you approach the stone from what we now call the summit side, back then there was a stile you had to cross. It's now an open gate. And that stile marked what was a perimeter of the ancient ceremonial enclosure. So there's a ring of power, protective ring of power in that stile. And every time you cross through that gateway, as it is now, the air changes. You'll always feel a change in the air, change in the energy, and suddenly you're conscious. It's like walking through the doors of a church, literally walking through the doors of possibly the oldest church in the land, a natural church. And we walked down the hill, and there's a second ring where there's a falling standing stone on your right, and there's a row of trees on the left. And the aforementioned Geoffrey of Monmouth had written that the stones of Stonehenge were flown to where they were in Aylesbury Plain.
That's right. Yeah.
By Merlin.
From
the hill of Ushnock. Or as he wrote it, Mons Caleris. But again, I mentioned Kildare, bottom of the hill, Mons Caleris, the height above Kildare.
Yeah.
Ushnock. And then you come down to Ulnamuran. And Burr said, okay, my arms are tingling now. So she went and she lay up on the flat bit, what I call the paw of the cat. And we retreated back up to the hawthorn trees just above the second ring, shall we say. And this is 10th to the 10th to 10 o'clock at night. It was misty. It was cold. It was starting to get very, very cold. So myself and Lisa, my wife and my aunt were there. We were kind of huddled in a group watching her, and she was just on the rock, and we could see her so clearly on Eimear from where we were. Like, we were about 100 feet back in the middle of the night, could see her clearly, and she was there for 45 minutes. Absolutely frozen. But she came down and she was bone dry. And she just said she had had her moment. She'd got her messages. And she told me she'd got 3 messages. The first one was for herself, about a sacred gift she couldn't talk about. Second one was for me, and she'd tell me about it when everyone else was away. And the third one she's never revealed. So the first one about her sacred gift, this all occurred on 10-10-10. And you'll be familiar with the Celtic proverbs about the ancient stories about feasting and celebrations, or when you're researching, when you're learning, you had to study for a year and a day before you could enter a respite. On 11-11-11, a year, a month, and a day later, Burr gave birth to her first child, a boy, at quite an advanced age, and having tried for quite a long time.
Wow.
So that then, 11-11-11-11, clicked in my head, okay, something's going on here. On the drive home that night, when Lisa and my aunt had passed out from exhaustion in the back of the car, Burr told me she'd been given a message that I was an extremely spiritual person, but I hadn't found the right path yet. And to watch for the balance, and it would become clear. I will just remember that line, watch for the balance and become clear. And it kind of struck me as something unusual because she's French. It wasn't a normal parlance for her. So something had been said. So 11-11-11, I started deep diving a bit further. Went back, studied as much as I could on all these aspects. Started visiting Uisneach an awful lot more, because I thought that's where the core of it is. And then come a year later, starting to feel a bit nuanced. Nothing's happening here. I'm not finding my route, not finding the way. So on 12-12-12, I got up very, very early in the morning. And I went up the hill before sunset. I travelled up. Again, wasn't as familiar with the farm as I am now, so I parked at the bottom of the hill and went up, kind of hoping, okay, I'm not going to get given out to for this. And went up. They knew me from lighting the fires with the local scouts. That's what they knew me as. So snuck up the hill and went up to Eimear and sat there and meditated for a few minutes. Like, I'm not a good meditator. I cannot turn this head off. And I sat there for a few minutes. I say a few minutes. It could have been about an hour. Anyway, the sun had come up by the time I was leaving the hill. And I went home and I changed my clothes and I went out to do the bit of farming. And just as I was going over the crest of the hill on our farm, there were 7 ancient ash trees on the hill on our farm that they're very, very old. And my grandfather had always said they were seedlings of the great ash of Uisneach, which is planted by Fintan MacBoca.
Go away.
Yeah, but these just happened to be in the line of sight. When that ash fell, when Patrick came, it said it fell from Uisneach and its upper branches hit Granard, which is 40 kilometres away. But our farm would actually be in the middle of that line. Wow. And coming across the crest of the hill, there's this ash tree, which I've known all my life. Now, I have to say, this site, this location, this ash tree has always been healthy, always been good, and a flood had come up around the ash tree. It has never flooded there before, and it has never flooded there since. Actually, hang on, I have a picture here. Excuse my belly.
That's okay.
That's what I meant. If I knock off the light for a second.
Wow.
Literally the tree of life.
Yes, and the reflection in the still water is just beautiful.
Yeah. That's what met me when I came down the hill.
Below.
So that was my sign on 12-12-12, a year, a month, and a day later after Burrs, that actually, okay, this was the right path to be on. Because that's what I'd asked for when I went up to meditate. Okay, I'm being cheeky here, but I need a sign. What am I doing? coming down the hill, there was a sign. Eimear herself pushed up the waters. As I said, the charge of Armageddon. Let the land, let the earth be your flesh. Let the waters of the land be your blood. Let the rocks be your skeleton. So it's
beautiful.
Yeah, that's my story.
Oh, that's just brilliant.
Sorry, Eimear, kind of went off on one there.
No, this is fascinating. Absolutely. I mean, that photograph of that ash tree, and I didn't know that there were people claiming that there were, that the trees were seedlings of one of the 5 phyla. I just think that's mind blowing.
No, it has to be said. It said Fintan brought over the first ash tree.
That's right.
I don't. This is the thing. I have an awful habit of. I remember stories when I'm told them. I can't remember when I read them. So when I go back to the actual written folklore, the stories I've been told by my granny or by other people as I go along, or hearing them in YouTube videos, they stick closer sometimes than the stories. But you'll always know when you hear it from a 19-year-old American girl saying, "This is the true story of it." Okay, that's fine. But when you hear it from Eddie Lenihan or yourself or from Laura, or again, anyone who's not familiar with Eddie Lenihan, go research him. a proper old school Shanachie. Shanachie is an Irish storyteller and story gatherer. Like, you hear him tell a story, it's incredible. I'll tell you a story, actually, my own experience with Eddie, if you don't mind. I'm a professionally, many professions. My main profession is I'm a civil, structural, and environmental engineer. Currently work for the local council. And when I was studying to be a student engineer, I had to do a placement. So I was working on a road scheme, bringing the road from Ennis, County Clare up to Galway. And
I know the story. Brilliant.
In the middle of this scheme, there was an ash tree. There was a hawthorn tree. Now, hawthorns, many hawthorns are said to be fairy trees. They're liminal places. The hawthorn itself, what you see above ground, so is echoed below ground. The branches are echoed by the roots. And it was said those were the sacred trees. It was one of the 7 sacred trees to the Druids, but it was sacred to the Sidhe because that was a doorway, a liminal place where they could slide from one world to the other. And certain hawthorn trees are fairy trees. Those are usually denoted because they're single trees standing on their own with rocks around the bottom. Now, we don't know if the trees grew to the rocks or if the rocks were placed there. But the hawthorn itself is effectively an immortal being because the current trunk will grow up and fall and a new trunk will grow again. So some of these trees, the cores of them are thousands of years old. Like the poster tree on Ushnock, I'll show you a picture in a few minutes. The core of that could be thousands of years old.
Wow.
But in the middle of this scheme was a tree that the locals claimed was a fairy tree. And I was working on site. I was a student engineer. I was effectively making coffee and printing drawings. And on site one day walks this man, not an awfully tall man, but a big personality, and his beard's going this way and his hair is going that way. And he walks up to the foreman. I have to say the contracting crew was a Spanish crew called Ferrovial, so they would not have passed much heed on Irish folklore. And he walks up to the foreman and says, "You cannot cut down this tree. This is a fairy tree. This is where the Munster fairies gathered to fight the Connacht fairies." And I looked at the other Irish lad, Robbie, who was working on the site, and I remember Eddie from a TV show back when we were kids called Tell Me a Story. And he'd tell fairy stories. And these now, again, not Tinkerbell stories. These are the stories you'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and, oh my God, shit. You didn't mess. So, okay, so we just retreated to the canteen to watch what was going to happen and not be involved. So I went up to the foreman, told him this. The foreman looked around and called over a crew, and effectively, I don't speak Spanish, but the gist was cut down the tree. They wouldn't do it. He could not get anyone to do it. So it went up then to the head office. They could not get another crew to come over to do it. Went up to the National Roads Authority, as it was at the time, and they said, okay, fine. We didn't want to get involved, so they handed it to the minister. The minister at the time was Seamus Brennan, the man from Galway. Mm-hmm. It ended up that the Minister for Transportation in Ireland had to go to Europe to get officially €5.5 million, unofficially 14 million euros, to reroute the road around this tree. So as you're traveling north now from Ennis today, where this where this occurred, they needed to put a junction anyway. So as you're traveling north, this junction passes over you, and the slip road for the new to join the road comes on over here, and the tree is sitting in this perfect little island on its own, unprotected. Now, it's suffered a lot recently with fumes and exhaust. It's not as healthy as it should be, but hopefully as we all transfer over to electric vehicles, it'll start coming again. But that's preserved. And that was a lesson to the roads office in Ireland, because the national roads, the roads office in Ireland were always known as the Great Ringfort Destroyers. That lesson from Eddie Lennon and that 14 million euros was hard fought. Ever since that, they take the archaeology extremely extensively, and not just the physical archaeology, but the folklore archaeology. They go back to what are the locals saying, what does the actual literature say about this place. We're so lucky here in the 1930s. The state sent out all the school children to go gather the stories from the old folks, the local stories and the local cures, and it's such a wealth of information. The Dukish collection is called. Right. And you can go to that, you can type in a place name and you can study out, see what's been said about this place. And some of the stories, you'll hear similar stories from different parts of the country, again, with different faces, different names, but the stories travel across the land. It's fantastic. But so the National Roads Office, or the Transport Infrastructure Ireland as it is now, they do extensive folkloric research for all these jobs as they're going before they get into them. Actually, I was working on a scheme about 6-7 years ago, straightening the road from Mullingar to Delvin, County Westmeath. This was an ancient portion of the Schleena Hostel, that road from Tara to Rathcrohan.
Is that the way of the ass?
Yes.
Okay, you'd said it earlier, and I wanted to get that. Okay.
That still exists. If you actually, the road that passes through Ballymahon, if you're familiar with it, if you look at it on Google Maps, most roads of that size in this country weave and wind, and that's mainly down to staying away from the expensive land, which belonged to the landlords to cut through the cheaper land. Whereas this particular route is almost dead straight, and as you say, leave Mullingar and you're heading for Lanesborough, County Longford, you leave Mullingar, dead straight road to the first hilltop you come to outside Rathconrath. There's a megalithic monument there, and that was your turn point to Urshnag. Next point, you have a dead straight road to Skeamore, the next hilltop. That was where Lou rescued Cuchulainn after the Battle of Clare Hill and brought down a mist to hide him for a week until he recovered. Then the road goes a dead straight line to Forgney Hill. Again, megalithic monument at the top. Then dead straight line to the first point where you can ford Loch Ree on the Shannon. And it was always talked about in ancient folklore, the wooing of Etain. One of those great stories. Etain was a great beauty, and she was wooed by a man called Midder, who lived locally on
Brilay. I've
which is now
there.
Exactly, Arda Hill, which is just up the road from us.
Yeah.
One of the challenges he was given was to build a toker, a carriage road, along the Sliena Hostel to carry it across the bog. And in 1989, they found it. It was found, the Correlate Trackway, about 600 metres of perfectly preserved oak roadway running right across the road, at least 2,000 years old. There's a visitor centre on it now, you can go visit it. The roadway's there and it's perfectly parallel.
Is it near Arda? This toker?
It's near Ballymahan, about halfway between Ballymahan and Lanesborough. It's very close to Arda. It's about a 10-minute drive from Arda.
Wow.
And then you cross the Shannon, and then you have a dead straight line in front of Slieve Bawn, the Great White Mountain, to Brackcrohan, the capital of Connacht. Well, we were straightening the road along the Sliena Hostel from Mullingar to Delvin. Now, in the famine times, the local landlords, to create work, made the roads longer, put in wines. They actually put in 6 kilometres of bends that didn't need to be there between Mullingar and Delvin. And that was fine when people were travelling slowly on horses and carts. But now, modern cars, it was claiming a lot of lives. So again, conscious of the folklore, okay, we're going along Sliena Hostel, conscious of the local folklore as well. The area we were working in was called Turin. Now, not Turin, Italy, Turin, as West people would call it. And
Turin,
one of the stories in our folklore is of the sons of Turin,
who
killed Cian, the father of Lugh. Okay, so we need to be extensive here. So we went through the folklore, we went through the archaeology, a more extensive archaeological sweep than we could have. We found a medieval village. It was fantastic, but we were able to preserve that, able to embank it and work over it. And went to work. And the tradition with these roadsides is you leave the farmer the use of the land until the very last minute, because we don't waste land in Ireland. We were denied it for so long, we don't waste it now. So very last minute, the farmer gets the land, and then the very first day, the fencing contractor goes in and he puts in these timber and wire fences that'll last for the life of the pavement, for the life of the road. So the fencing contractor goes in on day one, and he's driven 2 posts, bang, 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 in, bang, 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 in, 3rd post, bang, 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 clunk, doesn't go, starts cursing and blinding, left and blinding. I got a call saying this isn't going. The senior engineer said, okay, just get a mini digger and suck it in. So they go in with a mini digger and they pull back the earth and they pull back this stone. And sitting looking up at them is a little man in a little tomb. And as they said, as they pulled back the stone, there's this, and he just fell sideways. They'd hit
a body.
Yeah, they'd hit a cyst grave. About a 6,000-year-old grave. It would have been late megalithic. So when people stopped building the great passage tombs, they started building these little chamber tombs, chamber graves, and they perfectly stone lined, put the body in, and then generally they built a cairn upon it above. And in this case, the stones on the cairn have disappeared into the local field walls, and nobody knew he was there. And we hit him on day one.
You saying he was kneeling?
He was kneeling down, sitting up. It wasn't long enough for him. So he was kneeling down, kind of like hunkered like that.
And is it a skeleton or was his body preserved?
Oh no, the skeleton. I can show you pictures if nobody's squeamish. Hold on, let's see if I. Oh, hang on. I think I have it ready to go. Where is my folder? Sorry. Put it over this side. Sorry, this is very good television. Open with photos. There we go.
Just let me know when to click and I can click for you.
Yeah, if you click now.
Okay.
So I'll pull that over. So
okay.
Oh, I don't know what I've just done there now. Sorry.
Yeah, that one, yes.
Yeah, you're getting multiple layers. Okay, so that's literally what they found. Now they kind of said he was sitting upright until the vacuum emptied and he kind of fell sideways. Whatever way the skeleton had packed in, it was kind of sitting upright. So that's all that's left of him. 6,000 years old. The stones are perfectly fitted in. UCD took these stones afterwards and tried to refit them. And I was told that it took more than 50 students to try and get them back into place. So that's the effort that went into creating this grave. I think the second image should have, I'll open this one as well. Give me a second, sorry. Pull that over that side. That's it with the body removed and cleaned out. Incredible archaeology. Now, from my side, it made absolute nightmare. Sorry, I'll come out of there, Eimear.
Okay.
Absolute nightmare for the paperwork involved.
Wow.
Actually, will I take this moment to, while we're sharing, to show the pictures from Ushnock? Okay. These are some images from the Fire Festival at Ushnock. So, as I said, the people will gather. The local hunt will ride around on horseback and set the scene in advance. They all dress up in Celtic garb, and just it's an absolutely incredible scene. And then they'll start the procession. And
go slowly now. Go slowly with these pictures.
Yeah. Sorry. So the masculine procession will proceed from the Loo side of the hill and proceed up, and these are my own shots, so they're kind of varied across, and then that's the gathering. And in this case, the druidesses.
There's the goddesses. They're the goddesses.
Exactly. They processed up from Earl Namur in that time, and met them on the top of the hill.
Okay, there I am. I can see it. Yes, brilliant.
Yeah, there's a better one of you now in a second, I think. Then the hunt sent up the charge of the wild hunt up the hill. So they'll have the same in this. There's the group of the goddess. I think that's you in the middle there.
Yeah, that's me there. Yeah.
It was absolutely fantastic that year. The procession goes on. I'll come back out of this for a second. So then the people gather. The two tribes effectively meet. The process up, and then the great fire is lit. Now I didn't get an image of the actual fire itself going up because I was trying to get back to get silhouettes at this stage. Unless you have a very good camera, you're not going to get those angles. So I was going to get back at silhouettes. I love this shot here. I actually, a lot of people come and buy this shot. That's a local lady called Susan. She had a fall recently, so she's not riding anymore. But I love that shot. And then the one that's Justin Moffat kind of surveying the side of the record.
Lovely.
And actually, I'll show you some images from the hill itself. This is, if anyone wants to visit the Ushnock website, this is it here, ushnock.ie, UISNERCH. This is where you can do your bookings to come on the tours. If you want to learn all the history, everything is here. As I said, the guides they have are incredible. Like you have aspects for like we all cover the skeleton of the thing, but each tour gets different because people will ask questions that take you off in different ways, and everyone has their own strengths and fortes. Like myself and Helen will be kind of leading towards the spiritual side. Then you have Ruth Illingworth, who's a incredibly regarded local historian. She knows for the facts and the details. Her head holds are unbelievable. Then you have Justin Moffat, who's an archaeologist, and he was the main leader on the hill for so long, and he's from the hill, and he's tied to the hill, and his blood pours with the water at the hill, and his body is incredible. And if you get a tour with any of them, and then you have Simon, who carries all these aspects and weaves them. He's an absolute incredible story weaver. And Francis, the manager, who just draws people in, just attracts them in. And then you have Marty, who does random, Marty Mulligan. He's a proper old school Shanachie. He just tells a story and it sticks in your head, and just that's what, as I said, like I cannot read stories, but if you tell me a story, it'll stick, and I'll tell it back as I've learned it. And that's why I've had folklorists come back and say that's not what it says in the Book of Ballymote. Okay, well, I haven't read the Book of Ballymote. It wouldn't have stuck if I did, but I appreciate. Okay, those are the triads of Ireland. They're from the Book of Ballymote. Tell them to me, and I'll learn them. Don't let me read them. So I'll just fly through these. That's the overall. If I show the archaeology, actually, that's the image of the palace. And
you're going too fast.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah, that's just the palace as you're looking from the bottom of the hill.
Okay.
Looking up towards it. Now, there's not much to look at there, but once upon a time, if I go back out here, that's what it would have looked like.
It's amazing.
And this is a bivolanted conjoined ring fort. So double row ditches conjoined. It's that figure of 8, or the R2D2 as we say. And the two sides, the western side over here was lived day to day. That would have been where the Druids of Ireland lived day to day. We've been told, and and also the bards. Say when Christianity came in, the Druids didn't disappear. They fell back into the bardic and filla role. So the fillas of Ireland lived there. The last filla of Ireland, James MacGagan, only left just after the flight of the Earls and travelled to move on and wrote Historicus Hibernicus. And like the local village, Castlelongagan, he was of that tribe. They were the bards to the O'Neills.
Okay.
And so that house is still there. It is a round house originally with 2 extensions, which you would never heard of back and then. The entranceway is still preserved. Ushnock actually has the most well-defined entranceway of any ring fort in Ireland, aligned perfectly east. In fact, nearly all ring forts in Ireland, the houses or the main entrances aligned eastwards, both in tribute to the rising sun, but also so that you were woken by the rising sun, because they were practical as well as spiritual.
Yeah.
This is also ironic because if you look out the eastern entrance, you look over towards a place called Carrick on the other side of Loch Inel, the Lake of the O'Neills. And on the other side, Carrick was where the queens of Maja had their own land, because women could be rulers in their own right. Like, men only ruled because they had enough power. If a woman had enough power in her own right, she could rule outright as queen. Like, if Maeve had one more cow, she would have been outright ruler of Connacht. That's what it came down to.
Yeah.
So the queens, and likewise, you could have your own tribes, you could have your own lands, you could have your own lovers. Like, marriages were back then were marriages of arrangement and formalities to avoid warfare. Love didn't come into it. You could have your own lovers as long as by agreement with your husband. That's what came to the downfall of Lou, the Trieste of his wife Nos. But this gateway looks directly at Carrick, which is where the queens of Maja had their own land. So you could get up in the morning, look out the door, okay, who's visiting the wife today? That kind of thing. So the archaeology that goes with this is incredible and extensive. But I'll recommend to everyone, go to the website, uisneach.ie, and just explore. It's fantastic. I'll just show you some of the images. This one is always slow to load because there's so much in it. There we go. Here's some images from the fire festivals over the past few years. Like, we still have musicians, because you cannot have a celebration in Ireland without having music. So
that's Ronan
and there's some fantastic bands played this year. Bog Baddies have played. I know Dove, the Bard played them a couple of times on Judecast. They're a fantastic local band as well. It's always a great warm up. But then when people process up the hill and that fire goes up, there'll be a ring of fire and then it gets lit. And you can see the archaeological monuments around. Now, where we light the fire these days is a modern platform constructed to protect the hill. The ancient summit is just over. Actually, it's just over here. And you can see there was a cairn there. It's actually they discovered in recent past. It was always in mythology. It was always said that the good god, the Dagda, had a palace on the hill of Uisneach, and it was always said the summit of Uisneach was the Dagda's palace. And then when they started doing archaeology and research, they actually discovered, hang on, there's a passage tomb here. That this cairn at the top isn't a cairn; it's a fallen down passage tomb. And when the Ordnance Survey came through to do the mapping, they put a big triangulation station on it. Again, they put these triangulation stations everywhere. All the high summits, because you could see so far, but where there are high summits or where we had put our passage tombs, as my granny used to say, you either would put them there to keep an eye on your dead, or so your dead could keep an eye on you. And so they've been vandalized by these triangulation stations, but it marks out these points. On the summit of Uisneach, there's a triangulation station in the middle of this fallen passage tomb. When they started doing LiDAR surveys, they discovered a massive henge, a timber-built henge around it. Like, you'll all be familiar with Stonehenge. A henge is generally, Stonehenge itself isn't a henge, but a henge is an earthen embankment built around a ceremonial enclosure, usually spiritual. Say a ring fort is your circle, but that's to keep people out. A henge is your circle, but that's to keep people in. That's to keep the spiritual in. They found a timber and earthen henge around that ring fort, around that passage tomb on the summit of Uisneach. It was always believed to be the Dagda Palace. I think I've been told it was on the exact same week. They found the exact same structure around the sister site, the Mound of the Hostages on the Hill of Tara.
Oh, wow.
Now, we know the Mound of the Hostages on the Hill of Tara is aligned to the rising sun at Samhain and Imbolc. So, now, complete archaeological hypothesis here, but people are assuming that the one in Uisneach would have been aligned to the rising sun at Bealtaine and Lunasa, the two festivals associated with Uisneach, the festival of Eru at Bealtaine and the festival of Lu at Lunasa. But it is worth checking out. There's a statue of.
Isn't that beautiful? Eru herself.
Incredible. That's the work of Patsy Preston. I know you know Patsy. Absolutely incredible artist. She actually lives quite close to us here. She literally lives on the shores of Loch Reid, the aforementioned Lake of the Kings. This statue, it's one of the postcard images of Uisneach these days. People come. Patsy comes every few weeks and does her up for the season. So no two visits will she ever look the same. Like, she's currently wearing a big cloak and a brooch to keep her guarded for over the Samhain season. And in Imbolc, she'll have fresh snowdrops and everything coming up. She'll get her hair done. You come for Bealtaine. This would have been, probably looks like a late Lunasa look. But if you see her Bealtaine now, the fresh flowers and the growth around her, it's just incredible. She's alive. And what I love, like Patsy herself, when she titled the statue, she called it the statue of Danu. Danu being the mother god of the two of the Danu. Yeah. But like, as the guides in Uisneach say, it stands on Eru's hill. It's literally made of Eru, of the soil of the land. It could only be representation of Eru. But it's well worth a visit. Just to see that, it's incredible.
Incredible, yes.
Absolutely. That's the fairy tree, the aforementioned. So you'll see the stones around the hawthorn.
Yes.
Hawthorn is such a fantastic tree. It's healing in so many ways. Like the flower is good for the liver and the kidney. The haw itself, the berry that comes afterwards, is healing for the heart. When you crack into it's more like an apple than a fruit, because you get right in, there's a seed at the center, and you crack open that seed, the grain that's inside that, it contains traces of arsenic, but also can be used as an almond replacer if it's used properly. But it's very, very good for the heart. As I said, these were seen as liminal spaces where the she could pass between the places of the earth. Now, not all hawthorn trees are fairy trees, but all fairy trees are hawthorn trees. And you'll often see another version of them called the clotty trees or cluties.
Yes.
People would tie rags and ribbons on them, or rag trees. And the tradition being that if you had an illness or a wound, or if you wanted to make a wish or intention, you'd go there and you'd make an offering to the she. And you would hang a ribbon on the tree. And if you had an illness or a wound, you'd touch the rag off the wound. And as it hung to the tree, and as it rotted away, so the wound would be taken away. And this was all well and fine when everyone was wearing organic clothing and linens.
That's right, yes.
Everything's plastic now, so they're not rotting away. So good luck to that, people. And then the worst thing is, during COVID, people were hanging masks off these trees. It was disgusting. In fact, the great tree on Tara, that ancient fairy tree on Tara, split in half during COVID because of the weight of masks on it. So I'll ask people.
Wow.
Yeah. My granny's people coming from that island in Loughree didn't have anything to waste or anything to use. So their tradition, when they go to make an offering or ask a request on the fairy tree, they would take a piece of long grass from the bottom of the tree and they would weave it around the finger. So the she love anything that's of the earth but worked by the hand of man. That's your ideal offering to the she. And you'll find that anything you give them, they'll want more of. So ideal things to give them would seem like things like milk and alcohol. And so now, but milk will rot the tree, will cause a fungus, will rot the tree. Chocolate is a good one, but chocolate is poisonous to some animals. Alcohol is fantastic, they love it. But if you have a drink problem, you're going to find an abundance of it in your life, so don't. So this piece of grass from the base of the tree, weave it around their finger. It's of the earth, it's from the tree itself. It's worked by the hand of man. You whisper your intention into it, you whisper your wish into it, or you touch it off your wound. Hang it on the tree. It's organic. It fits all the purposes. It'll rot away very quickly. If you're of the Irish tradition and want to make offerings to the she, if you take nothing else away from this talk tonight, try that as your offering instead, because it fits all the purposes and it just ties in, and it'll save the trees. That's the big thing. That's what really woke me up to this after that tree split in half on Tara, was just, okay, people need to stop.
I didn't know, I hadn't heard that. Okay.
Yeah, it's like, for fairness, both sides are still alive, but it's considering how beautiful it was, you could literally walk between the gaps, so big. I'll zoom out again. That's a carving of the Green Man, which meets you as you enter Rushnok. That was done by a local artist called Richie Clark. He also did a carving of Lou. He did it in a single day with a chainsaw. There's Earl Namurn herself, the cat stone. You can see the name of the cat stone, that there's the body and the head of the cat with her ears pointing out. There's a paw and she's playing with a mouse. If you look at her from the other side, from the southern side looking up, it looks like a cat about to pounce over a mouse. But the true side, I don't think there's a picture of it here. If you really have to see it to get it, the true side is looking from the direct south.
Okay.
And at that point, you get the true name of the rock. It's Earl Namurn, the stone of the divisions. And what it actually is a map of Ireland. It splits into the 5 portions. And it's said that when it was split by the Partholonians and then by the Fomorians and then later on by Tuathail Teachmar, when he took the kingdom of Midge back from the 4 provinces, they announced that there'd be warfare in Ulster in the north.
Yeah.
Let there be prosperity in Leinster in the east. Yeah. Let there be music and dancing in Munster in the south, and let the knowledge of the land be imbued in Connacht in the west, and let it be tied together with sovereignty and spirituality by Royal Midge, the centre. And at the centre,
can we say that now very slowly so our guests can hear it?
Let there be warfare in the north in Ulster, and to some degree there still is. Let there be prosperity in the east in Leinster. Let the music and dancing of the land be in Munster in the south, and let the knowledge of the land be imbued in Connacht in the west, and let it be tied together by sovereignty and spirituality by Midge in the centre. Now, I tell that differently every time because there's slight variations, and that's a translation from old Irish, so it ties in. And when you're there as well, looking at it from the southern side, the divisions themselves suddenly become important, because the stone of the divisions, and the divisions are as important as the stone, because our ancestors saw spaces in between. The spirit. Yeah. The 5th province is the province of the spirit, and those spaces in between are as important. And that cavern underneath, in that space below, is where Eru herself rests. Not where she's buried, it's where she rests.
Okay.
Sorry, I got a bit.
That's beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah.
I hope it tied in. Sorry, I've gone off one completely. Sorry.
They're wonderful. They're wonderful stories.
I'll hop out of that there. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to drop of water. Sorry, Eimear. Thanks.
It's just beautiful. Just beautiful. You get nuts. Anthony says, thanks, that's so helpful. I have so much trouble deciding on an appropriate offering sometimes. Julie says, what a great idea. I never have offerings to hand, but grass is everywhere. Same. And then Gabriella's just touched the music and dancing in the south. Okay.
Yeah, it's always there.
And then Pat, Pat Booker. That's why I always leave Pat with 3 strands of grass as an offering. Okay, Julie's never been to Ireland. You'll have to change that. Indeed, you will. Yes.
Oh, do yeah. No, there's so much. Even just to come and just sit in a corner of a pub and watch people just go mad. It's great.
Yes, it is. Just brilliant. Okay. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, that's great. So, you mind rivers, because that really fascinated me when I met you at Eimear.
It was one of the roles in my now former job. I'm still in the same job, but I've been shifted to a different department. Like, I'm the engineer for the local council, and I was the environmental engineer for the local council. So I had the responsibility for the water maintenance and just assessment and just keeping the purity of the waters. Well, for 4 main rivers, the principal ones being the Brosna, the Deal, the River Inny, which passes by my own home, and then of course a portion of the Shannon. But the Shannon is a vast system in its own right. Within that as well, we had several lakes, like Westmeath. I work for Westmeath County Council. That's, you can kind of guess it. I'm from Longford. You don't work in the county you live in. That just creates too many issues. So I work for the next county over, literally a mile across the way to Westmeath. And within that, then we have several lakes. Some of them are well known in our mythology and folklore, especially around Mullingar. You have Loch Ennell, Loch Oul, and Loch Derivara. Loch Derivara, of course, being where the children of Lur returned to the Swans and spent their first 300 years. One of the issues with Westmeath, say Ireland's well known for its bathing waters and surfing waters and the quality of the waters. However, we only have 9 inland bathing areas, which are authorised bathing areas, where the water is tested and maintained and certified by the Environmental Protection Agency. Of those 9, 3 of them are in Westmeath. So it was a big ask. We had to go water sample and test all of these other. Now they tie into those sacred rivers. So Loch Lane is actually one of the cleanest lakes in the country. It's beautiful, a swimming area up near the north of the land. If you're familiar with Moncon McGann, he lives just beside the edge of it. You'd often meet him swimming in the mornings.
So Loch Lane, is the lake of learning?
Exactly. Yeah. And the River Deal flows from Loch Lane. So if you keep Loch Lane clean, you can try and keep River Deal clean. Then Loch Oul is the source of the River Brosna, which then flows into Loch Ennell, the Lake of the Kings. Loch Oul is
the source of the Brosna.
Source of the Brosna.
Okay, because that's the river that passed through Fermanagh, where I come from.
Oh, and yeah, that's right.
Shannon Harbour, which is
of course, yeah. So that then flows from Loch Oul, just north of Mullingar, around Mullingar, where it hits its first contamination, into Loch Ennell. Now, Loch Ennell is fed by several other small rivers, and one of the issues we've had in the last few years is farmers' slurry waste going out before rain falls, polluting the river, causing over-nutrification, and that bathing area that's at Lilliput. People might be familiar with Lilliput and Jonathan Swift. He was staying at a place called Lilliput when he wrote Gulliver's Travels, and that's outside Mullingar on Loch Ennell, and that's where that place is. And that's where we have a bathing area, which is constantly being flushed through by farmer sewage. So trying to keep that, we had a massive challenge over the last few years trying to get that back up to standards. So we've achieved that. So the Brosna is now back to purity standards passing through Westmeath. Until you hit Kilbeggan, where there are 2 EPA processed meat processing plants, and they have discharge licenses into the Brosna, which meet EPA standards. But I wouldn't be letting my children swim in the river south of Kilbeggan. And that's actually how I think I caught your attention when I said that at Eimear. We were passing through Clara, and I said, don't go into the river. I wouldn't. No, it said you'd probably be fine. Like, I live right next to the Inny. I purposely never looked at the water samples from the Inny or from Loch Derivara. I let that go to the Longford office because I didn't want to know. Because in the summertime, I'd swim in that every evening. If I get sick, I'll fight it off. If I don't know, I don't know. And then of course the Shannon, but the Shannon is such a massive body. She's the spine of the land.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just you try and just maintain. The biggest issue with the Shannon is from my when I was trying to keep that portion of it. There was a former oil depot in Athlone, which was run by a member of a former political dynasty from the area, and because they were of a political dynasty, they got away with.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I won't go into.
No, it's okay. Don't name.
No, I won't name names. But a modern oil company took over the same site, and every time there's heavy rain, the historical oil releases in the sludge, and we landed back on the current oil company saying, "Look, you have to tighten up." And every time we can say, "No, we know it's not you; it's what's in the soil." And we're just trying to clear that out as much as we can. Like we've had 3 massive oil spills while I was there, and all of it was historic oil from the late 60s on. And then the first person to come and complain was a sitting county councillor who's the son of this the individual who caused it. But I won't get into that. It's just gotten messy. But like we had one other major oil spill which came from a vehicle treatment site, and literally is one of these poster image sites of trying to clean the swans and get out, and all the ecologists and environmentalists come and they're pointing the finger at the council, and at that stage it's firefighting. You're trying to mitigate the damage, you're trying to get back, and you're trying to make sure this doesn't happen again, because okay, this site, we've red flagged this site, what can we do to box that in so that nothing's getting out of there again? And it's trying to maintain, and you never feel so useless at your job. That's when you're standing on the bank of a river that you've felt, which is sacred to you, which is literally part of your spirituality, and you're watching that just die in front of you. Like a single drop of crude oil can pollute 100 meters squared of surface water.
A single drop can pollute 100 meters squared.
Yeah, of crude oil. Now, it goes down to the crudeness beyond that, but if you go into diesel is very heavily polluting. And when it has sludges and it gets very demoralizing very quickly. So I think for my own sanity, the council moved me out of that department. Even it was the most rewarding work I've ever done, but I was taking it very much to heart, and very much to be fair, my main role in there was waste management. So making sure that local waste providers were meeting the requirements, they were serving the community, that any waste facilities in the area were meeting the standards, that nothing was being polluted, that recycling was being carried out appropriately, that recycling was available to people, just to keep that moving forward and keep it optional, and then make sure that these sites weren't taking in stuff that were supposed to be taken in, checking for asbestos and stuff like that wasn't getting into the waters and into the systems. Because if you can, each one small site, okay, he got away with it, now he'll try and get away with it, they'll all try and get away, and it escalates. Yeah. So it's just, and like the council, no matter how hard you work, you never have enough work done. No matter how many staff you have, you never have enough. You can never please everyone, but at the end of the day, if you make some small difference, you've done something. But yeah, it was getting very demoralizing, and especially with the Shannon. But then, as I said, the Shannon's such a big system, something could have happened up the top of Leitrim, and you still have to try and protect your own area because it's coming down.
Yeah, we had a cruiser on the Shannon, so I had no idea when, so often spending summers going through Loughree, that fantastic. There were islands that were inhabited.
Oh yeah, and so many of them, and some of them are massive. Like Inchclaron itself is the size of a small town, and there was a village there till the 1950s. Inchmore had families living on it. There was an American family had a holiday house that used to come to there until recently. Inchmore was where the famous beast of Loughree, or the Loughree monster, was seen by the priests back in the 1930s.
Do you want to tell us that?
Well, there was 2 priests out fishing, so because it was 2 priests, people automatically assumed it was true. And they're out fishing, and they saw a massive sea beast in the middle of Loughree. Now, Loughree is always said to be bottomless in the middle, around an area called the Black Islands, which always seem to be shrouded in mist, right at the narrowing point of Loughree. And they were out fishing and saw this beast. And I think they were just trying to create a Loch Ness monster in Loughree. But there was also stories in the old mythology of a mermaid in Loughree. Now, I don't know much. To be fair, I don't know much about the mermaid folklore and the Selkie folklore in Ireland, but I know an awful lot of people have claimed to have heard it or claimed to have seen it over the years. I won't get into I don't know enough about the folklore to get into it. It's not a story that was ever told to me directly by family members, probably because Loughree was so sacred, so important. They didn't want to pushes away. You're not afraid of Lough Ree. You go out in your canoe, you explore Lough Ree, go to the islands, you go to Inchclare and you see where Maeve died. The site is actually marked by a monument. It's even on the maps, it's down as Inuwarad Maeve, the site of Maeve's death. And beside it is a massive ancient monastery. Beside it, not around it.
So you can only get to it by boat?
Only by boat, yeah. And it's split exactly in the half by Longford and Roscommon. So one half of the island belongs to Longford, one half belongs to Roscommon. It's where the three counties meet. Longford, Westmeath, and Roscommon. That famous Brendan Shane song.
I do, yes.
But no, it's well worth. It's someday with a small boat, get out and just explore the islands, because there's a wealth of history out there. And likewise, the O'Briens had a fortress on it because they control the Shannon from Killaloe. Killaloe, yes. And likewise, then the Vikings took several forts along the Shannon. Had forts on Lough Ree. Like the first Viking to really explore into the land and take it had a fort in Lough Ree, had a fort in Lough Lane, and was killed finally by Malachy Moore and Lough Oul. He convinced him he was going to marry his daughter and brought him onto one of the islands in Lough Oul and had a load of warriors dressed up as women. They attacked him, put him in a bar, rolled him down a hill called Captain's Hill outside Mullingar, and he drowned in the bar. And he's buried in a cairn outside Captain's Hill. Turgesis was the name of the
This is Turgesis who died?
Turgesis who died, yeah, in Mullingar.
Oh, wow.
I'd have all the Uisneach guys screaming at me, "You're getting that wrong! You're getting that wrong!" But that's again at the point where he died is where the source of the Brosna is, just at the top of Lough Oul.
Wow. This is just fascinating.
Yeah, sorry, I've completely gone on the history rant this whole way through.
No, it's lovely. I hope. I mean, I'm enjoying it. I hope our guests are, our viewers are. That you animating the landscape and just beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
What I love about those places, though, like we're so lucky. Like we have such a wealth here that you can walk the land, and the land will tell you your stories. Like I always worry going up, taking a tour group up, because I could have groups that could range from 1 or 2 people to 50 people. And you just think, okay, well, I remember this story, but I remember this aspect. Then you put your feet on the soil, and she just tells you. You're walking along, and it just tells you a story. Or somebody will ask a question, and it'll go in a completely different direction, because there's layers, there's thousands of years of history, and that's just Uisneach. And then you get to the summit, and you look out, and you can look to Slieve Bawn, you can look to Slieve Nicalliach, you can look to Slieve Gullion, you can look over to Croghan Hill, and I'll go talk about Bridget and Croghan Hill, and then I'll talk about what we call the Bridget line, because you can draw an exact solar alignment. This rising sun on the winter solstice will rise above Croghan Hill, and as we said, that's heralding the coming of Bridget. You've hit the shortest day of the year. Now the rising sun on this day heralds the coming of Bridget and the time of Bridget. And flip that conversely, exactly 180 over. The setting sun on the longest day will set what they call the cleavage of Slieve Bawn, the gap in Slieve Bawn, which marks the point of Rathcroghan, which marks Uv Nagach, the resting place of the Morrigan. So the setting sun on the summer solstice marks the coming of the time of the Morrigan. And so
you can see that from Uisneach.
You can. You won't see Uv Nagach, but directly behind.
You can see the.
You can, yeah. And likewise, then on the summer solstice, the rising sun on the summer solstice will rise directly behind Lough Crew. And if you're familiar with Anthony Murphy from Mythical Ireland, he discovered this. Even Michael Dames had written about in the book called Mythical Ireland several years ago, about the astronomical alignments, and so many solar alignments and astronomical alignments in Ireland cross through Uisneach. But the big ones they point out were that one, what we call the Bridget line, say from Croghan Hill, where Croghan Hill, people always said was the seat where Bridget had her sacred fires and had her sacred forge. She being the goddess of the fires, the goddess of the smiths, the goddess of the sacred waters, the goddess of healers, of midwives, of mothers and nurses. But she had her forge and her sacred fire in Croghan Hill on the boundary.
I was there for the first time in the summer, actually.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. It's a bit of a climb. The last bit is a serious climb, but it's beautiful. And when people started doing geology study, somebody discovered back in the 18th century, hang on, this is an extinct volcano. So you think about this sacred fire, and suddenly an extinct volcano lines up.
Ah, yes.
And then straight line to Uisneach, straight line to Uv Nagach. Converse that over, what we call the Cailleach line. You draw a dead straight line from Ulnamuran on Uisneach, straight up through Slieve Nicalliach, the Hill of the Witch, Lough Crew, passing over Carntee, and continue that line. You come to the cairn of the Callibera and Slieve Gullion. You can draw that on Google
Because
Maps.
Pat Booker, just because, can you see Slieve Gullion from Mishnah? She just asked that question.
You can, Slieve Gullion is just blocked by Slieve na Gaelic because they're on that exact line, literally to the foot. If you draw a line from the Carn the Collie area on Slieve Gullion down to the Ulnamur on Ushnock, you will cross the top of Carn T. You will cross over the Hag's Chair on Slieve na Gaelic. And in fact, you might be familiar with Lough Crew. There's like field boundaries running across the middle of the site, lining up with them. It cuts directly across that line. So as you're walking around Lough Crew, you literally can physically cross the Cailleach line. If you throw that southward, keep going the whole way across. Now you have to cross a long way before you come near anything, but when you do hit it, you hit County Kerry and you hit Slieve Mish. Which is also written down in Michael Dames's book as Éirú seat, because sometimes in the folklore it said that's where Éirú, Banba and Folu sat to watch the two of the sons of Mill initially come to Ireland before the Seven Waves. You throw that down even further, you come to Shneem in County Kerry, the very end of the land, and to a line of standing stones at the very tip of Shneem, which is said to be where Amergan's wife Sneem was buried. And
Amergan gives the surname Bergen comes from Amergan, and it's a common name here in Kilkenny. And 10 minutes upriver, there's a Rat Bay, and that's where Erevan, Amergan's brother, the first Milesian High King, is buried allegedly.
Oh wow! Didn't know that. Okay.
And they say he was married to Tia, who gives her name to Tara.
Yes. Oh, that makes sense. That's what I love. Every time you tell somebody a story, there's always something comes in. Like I remember on the summer solstice, there was a family from the Aran Islands were with us, and I was talking about these solar alignments and talking about how the land lines up. And then one of them said to me, "Did you know actually that comes back to the ancient Irish language, and about if you're imagining the land the map as we see it now, we see Ulster in the north and Connacht and Munster in the south. In ancient Ireland, they would have seen it the other way around. Like we would have seen the land lying flat, so the Connacht was seen at the top. And so if you're talking about why it came up, I was talking about the tradition of when you enter a sacred site, you typically go around 3 times Joshel. In Ireland, Joshel comes from the word right hand, even though you're going leftward. Comes from the right hand because you have dropped your weapon, which you carry in your right hand, and you're going around paying tribute to the site with your right hand, even though you're going leftward. And one of them said, but that actually comes back to the Irish language because you're talking about your deshcart, your tushcart. Actually was the word for the south.
It's going sunwise. Yeah.
Going sunwise, so you're following around, and that kind of hadn't awakened, but that's why I love everyone comes with a different aspect, a different story, and it just layers and layers and layers. It's great.
And the opposite of Deshel is Tuchel, which is going towards the north.
That's exactly. Going to the left hand.
Yeah. Which is because you're aligned to the east, and then when you go to the left, you're going to the north.
Yeah, somebody was asking me how that compares to Widdershins, and I can never remember which one's which.
Widdershins is Tuchel. And
yeah. I can never. I always loses it as I go along.
Oh, just brilliant. So people are really enjoying this. So Aspiring Amy says, I adore this. Please do more of this. So, just absolutely wonderful.
That's what really drew me in, like the nature of these chats. I just can sit and chat to people, and like I'm constantly like I joined, as mentioned to you before, I joined the order about 6-9 months ago and was working slowly through the thing, and I'm so conscious about not being a burden on anyone. I never actually got around to applying for a mentor, and I know I should. And I kind of hijacked your chat last week and threw in and commented about mentor, and everyone came back with such fantastic advice, absolutely fantastic advice. So on Friday last week, I went and finally applied. And I have to, in fairness, is it Gwen or Gail? Gail got back to me on Sunday night with a mentor and with all the details and how to go about it, and absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. And to be fair, I still haven't contacted the lovely lady yet to get out. I must do that tonight, actually. And
give yourself a break. It took me 6 years to apply for a mentor. I was just so paranoid.
Oh, so I know. Did you come
everyone has their own journey. Everyone has their own journey. So don't worry.
But I do love the sense of support that comes, and like the chats within the chats, and how everyone can just it's unbelievable the gift that is when you're coming from a solo mindset for so long.
And that's what I love, because that was not anticipated, that people would be having conversations in the chat as well. And I've, because I can't deal with all the questions, and sometimes it's a long question or a long comment, and then somebody comes in with something, really kind, caring, compassionate response, and it's just lovely to have those conversations as well. So I really appreciate it.
Oh,
So Gabrielle has a question just for me. How do you say storyteller in Irish? Well, there's two ways. There's Shanachie or Scéalaí. So the scale is the Irish for a story. So yeah.
Shanachie goes back to holder of the old ways.
Yeah. So do you have do you write poetry?
I used to, and I was kind of conscious that you might ask me that question. So I went out last night and found my old book and went trawling through it, and nothing was suitable. So I sat down this morning and wrote one, just in case.
Oh my God! I think I'm amazing.
I ran it past
to write stuff.
I ran it past a core group of friends just to coming online, make sure actually is this suitable to say, and they said no, it's okay, go for it. It's grand.
Oh, wonderful! So off you go.
Okay.
Away, la.
This is the bit I was most nervous about. Get my right
now slowly, so we can really appreciate it.
I'll try to put on my tour guide's voice. The light went out, and her world fell away. Calmly, bare feet sought the new moon's grass. Tethers released, the skin touched clay. The light was out. She wrapped herself to the divine, wrapped herself in that midnight cloak. Forward gliding, supping warm cacao. Heart awakens with medicine and hope. The light was out. She's bounding to the vibrations of the frostbit soil, the grounding power of Mother Earth. Healing pulses, energy rising. She rekindles the flames of her power and her worth. The light was out. She walks knowingly on, seeking that solitary ancient ancestor, holding court in the corner lawn, embracing the oak tree's sheltered wisdom, offloading her primal human woe, a spiritual photosynthesis, nature's gift so both may grow. The light was out and the town was black. She is alive now. She has her angel on her back. Fearless now for the lack of light, it's the darkness that opens her eyes. The present tense falls away, she's carried aloft to the skies. Fearless now, the night's company she's with. She is one with the earth. She can see the infinite.
Beautiful. And that was this morning?
This morning and this afternoon. I had a sick kid today, so I kind of had a bit of time to adjust and come up with something.
So you can write poetry when you have a child sick. Howard, my husband, could do that. He could just throw stuff out while he's waiting for the bread to rise.
I literally panicked and I went back through old stuff and thought, no, it's not suitable. You suddenly realize, looking at it with the eyes of a 37-year-old, that stuff you wrote when you were 19, 20, 25. Different agendas. So the stories come across very differently.
That was beautiful.
That was just inspired by a friend who goes out late night every night or early morning in the dark to ground, to connect to the earth, to have her eyes awaken. As they say, like when the light goes out, you can't see the world in front of you, but you can see the infinite.
That's right.
See those stars, see eternity. It's fantastic.
Well, there's lots of, that was a beautiful poem, such imagery. Wow, what a powerful poem recited so beautifully. How beautiful, lovely poem. This is Gabriella. This whole session has been disruptive and magical. Great. Absolutely beautiful poem from Amy. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you all so much. I guess I'm Irish. I don't wear comments or positivity very well. So thank you all so much. It's just...
And Neem says, alive in the darkness. Lovely. It's just beautiful. I love the dark. And Maria says, really connected to the land. It's just beautiful. Just beautiful.
I always feel there's nothing to be afraid of in the dark. Once you know, once you're aware of yourself and aware of where you are, and you can connect, there's nothing to be afraid of in the dark. Anything that you're afraid of in the dark is man-made. That's
right.
Yeah.
And a lot in your own head. Oh, that's just brilliant. So just where do you get your imas from, or your awen? I'm just thinking of, what feeds it?
I don't know. Like it's possibly the land herself. I'll take off my shoes and I'll walk across the soil and I'll tune into what what the land is telling me. I'll be out in my vegetable garden. That's when I get my most inspiration most times. Even for doing other work is when I'm out tending the vegetable garden at home. And that's following out at the moment, so that's something I'm lacking. But I genuinely don't know. And likewise, we have a musical tradition here, and things just lie in and come together. And then you'll have random conversations with friends, and the line will stick. And that there's a line I had in that spiritual photosynthesis that came to me years ago as something that I'm not sure had I said it myself or it's something that had been said to me most likely by my granny. And it triggered recently during one of Philip's talks, and he was talking about going to the trees and offloading, and that triggered something that had been said to me as a child, that you go to the trees and they thrive on our woe, on our soap opera. They move at such a global scale and such a slow path that our manic little lives are like a soap opera to them, and they thrive on that. And as much as the carbon dioxide that we breathe out is poisonous to us, it's life-giving to them.
That's right.
They give us back that oxygen, that photosynthesis. So by taking our issues, our woes, our thoughts, our dreams to the trees and giving it to the tree, maybe we're entertaining them, maybe we're not, but they give us back that balance. So we both grow together.
That's a beautiful exchange.
Such a healing there. Yeah, there is.
I know it. It's just something about the dark. This is from Pat Booker. Terry Pratchett said witches were never afraid of the dark because they knew they were the scariest thing.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time, and there's loads more we could talk about. So generally, I end with, what's your favorite season and what's your favorite festival? At the wheel of the year.
If you had asked me until the last 5 years, I'd have always said winter was my favorite season. And since in the last 5 years, it's become summer. And I don't know why. Each season has its own aspects. I love how I get to slow down in winter when the cattle go into the sheds at a set time. You can do in spring, then the hopefulness of spring. When Bridget's Day comes around and you can start tilling the soil and there's hope you put in and the fertility starts rising. And then, like, for me, obviously my favorite festival is Bealtaine. It's tied to the core.
Gabriella has guessed it right this time.
Yeah, exactly.
She's making bets and gets it wrong. This is her first time. Well done.
It's tied to who I am. It's tied to the lineage of my family and my soil. Like my mother's people were Caseys and Brehonys. One were the Brehons to the clans of Connacht. The O'Brehonys were Brehons to the O'Neills. My father's people were Clancy's. They were Brehons to the O'Briens. So the love of justice is tied in there, and the time of Bealtaine is tied to the core of who I am. And it's just fantastic. And then the opening of that's when you come to summer and you see Eimear at her brightest and the land is ripe and the fertility is coming. It's incredible. But then I love autumn. I love when everything slows down a bit and the collier throws a veil across us and we start retreating down. The late autumn is always a panicky time for me as a farmer and who works another job, because you're always battling daylight, always trying to get home to get things done, but the battle is on. But hopefully I get things organized a bit better. But if I slow down, I can go back.
So you've got cattle. So wait a second. So you're the engineer for Westmeath County Council.
I'm a farmer.
You're a guide at Ishnark and you're a farmer.
And a photographer.
And a dad, 2 young kids, and a boat.
Well, I'm not a full-time boat. That's the first poem I've written in ages. So
yeah, but you found the time today to do it on a working day.
As I said, I was actually just purely auspicious. I think the child got sick just to facilitate that poem.
And a storyteller, Gabriella adds, and you're a storyteller.
That's actually something I'd love to get more into, storytelling. I was a passion for a long time. I was actually considering running a small course on storytelling for Irish people and how to gather a story. Because, like, family lineage, again, people were great storytellers. They knew how to go out and ask people. People these days don't go and ask for the stories. They feel you're intruding upon people's personalities. Whereas once upon a time, that was just a given. You walked into somebody's house and they told you a story. You go in, and it came with a cup of tea. There was a story, and it might have been personal. It might have been an older story, and that's why that Dukas collection is so important. Was because those kids went out in the 1930s. They gathered those stories. It's a bit like the monks in the 8th century went out. Like all our folklore, ancient mythology was written down. It was told orally and then written down by monks who went out and gathered those stories in the 8th century. Now they took that opportunity to put a Christian slant in it. Like the first people to come to Ireland were the people of Kezer. Oh, she was the granddaughter of Noah. That's how we tie that in. So it does, but we managed to hold them. We managed to hold them through conquest and division and history, and they're there. And the stories, when you go out on the land, it becomes alive, and the people are alive, and it's fantastic. But that's why I'd love to get into story gathering, and I was considering running a course sometime for local friends, because so many people don't realize the wealth of stuff that's just there. Just reach out and take it. It's
absolutely. So I'm involved in storytelling. With Storytellers Ireland, we have our AGM on Saturday.
Oh, class.
And so with a lot of storytelling festivals, we'd one in Bray 2 weeks ago, and I was down in Listowel and I told a story and recorded the story. Up on YouTube in the Sheehan Story Cottage.
Oh, class.
So, and then we just started our Kilkenny storytelling circle back. We revived it after COVID. So our next one is the 12th of December. It's the second Monday of the month. Oh, and then Cork have them, Dublin, you can do them online. So actually one of the gifts of COVID is that a lot of the physical storytelling circles then went online, and they've continued because now they've got international story telling circles. Oh, so brilliant. I've been, it's brilliant. So
and you record them, and they can live on prosperity then as well. Right, it's amazing. No, thanks. Thanks so much for all the inspiration, Eimear. It's just absolutely fantastic. I literally standing where I am now today because of the inspiration that's come from the invest has come through yourself and through the order. Thank you so much.
So anyway, it's just been an absolute joy talking to you, Sean. I want to listen to more of your stories, and because I know you've loads, and Pat's put the link up. I don't know if Pat, is that the one I did, the Sive story? I don't know if that's it.
Oh, but Sive, the mother of Oisin.
Yeah, well, I tell it from her perspective, because she appears in Slieve na Mon as a deer, and then she disappears very quickly, and then Finn finds Oisin, and it's like, well, what about? So I tell it from her perspective.
Oh, that's fantastic. So did you ever, going back to Laura's, did you ever read her book of Tales of Old Ireland Retold? She tells us a load of the stories from different points of view. Like what caught me was the children of Lur. She told the children of Lur from Aoife's point of view.
So I tell it from Aoife's perspective.
Yeah, and I love that. That's actually why I named my daughter Aoife. I was sitting on Loch Derivara, taking the water samples and listening to that. She was doing it on YouTube, listening to that story, and it just snuck me. And I was looking at the statue then at Loch Oul when I came back, and that statue of Aoife bursting into birds. And Aoife is an incredible and powerful name. Like, if you want to have a role model, a strong, independent woman who is not afraid to stand up for her own rights, to protect herself and protect these children, that's ideal. And it just struck me then, okay, this is what we name the girl, Aoife. And I went back, and when she was born, and we were about to baptize her, some of my colleagues, because in Westmeath, it was all, you can't name a child Aoife, it's a cursed name. Because they go back to that children of their story. Oh, she was the witch who turned them into swans. But no, and I could not say she could not be more of an Aoife than the Aoife she is. It's incredible.
Yes. Okay. Anyway, it's been just such a joy talking to you.
Thank you so much.
And I'm looking forward to more storytelling when I see you again.
Definitely. And I'm hoping to be sooner rather than later.
Anyway, it's just Michelle says the time flew by. It was great to listen to such fascinating, enchanting stories. So it's been really, really enjoyable. So I'll let you say goodbye, and then we can just look at the comments. So I'll let you say goodbye.
Thank you all so much. As I said, I was so nervous about spending 2 hours talking, but it just flew. And I'll ask anyone, if you want to come to Uisneach, please make contact. We will welcome everyone. It's well worth putting on the bucket list, especially come for the Bealtaine Fire Festival. You will literally have your heart set alight. Come join us. It'll be great.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Eimear.
I'm just going to, you stay where you are. I'm going to just send you back, and I'll talk to you in a minute. So listen, thank you so much for your wonderful comments, and for being here this evening, and really, really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed that chat as well with Sean. Has been fascinating. So I look forward to seeing you again next week. Well, I'll have another interesting guest. So have a good morning, a good evening, a good afternoon, wherever you are. And have a good week. So until we meet again, slán go fóill.